Always pretending to be busy. You just want to avoid housework, don't you? No, that's not true. I'm working hard for our life. Enough. A wife who doesn't do housework is a failure. As usual, my mother-in-law yelled at me, even though I worked day and night. She knew that if she raised her voice, I wouldn't fight back. No matter what I said, she always shouted over me. She never cared about how I felt. Will my life always be like this? I'm working so hard to support our way of living, but this suffocating routine is pushing me to my limit. One day, my husband said something shocking. You don't have to be my wife anymore. My name is Isabella, and I'm 36 years old. I met my husband, Mike, through a friend. Before we got married, I worked a normal office job, but I quit after we tied the knot. Mike has a good-paying job at a flooring company, so we could live comfortably on his salary. Still, I worked part-time at a local supermarket. Then, one day, after being married for years, Mike came home looking serious. Hey, can I tell you something? You might get mad, though. Huh? What is it? Why do you look so serious? My university friend, Sam, invited me to start a business with him. I've always wanted to do something like that. A business? Yeah, I've talked about this dream before. At first, it might be tough, and we might struggle financially, but I really want to try. His eyes lit up with determination. Seeing him like that, I couldn't stop myself from answering. Of course, you should do it. Really? Are you sure? Yes, if this is your dream, you should go for it. But things might get hard for a while, and it'll put more pressure on you. Isabella. Don't worry about me, I can just work extra shifts at my part-time job. Thank you, Isabella. Really, thank you for supporting me. The next month, Mike quit his job and started preparing for his new business with Sam. Life was about to change, and I knew I had to stay strong and support him. Then, a few months later, something unexpected happened. Mike's mother fell down the stairs and got injured. She had to use crutches for a while. Mike sat me down to talk. Dad passed away 2 years ago, and Mom lives alone. It's hard for her to do chores and take care of herself right now. Yeah, that makes sense. So, she wants to stay with us until she recovers. Wait, you mean move into our apartment? Yeah, but I know this is sudden. I could tell Mike was worried. He knew I didn't get along with his mother, so he wanted to check with me first. My mother-in-law had been difficult ever since I married Mike. When we first met, she completely ignored me and only talked to him. I can't believe Mike's partner is just an ordinary girl like this, she said. It was rude, but at least Mike defended me. Still, her attitude never changed. Even when Mike wasn't around, she kept making nasty comments during phone calls. Sometimes, she even visited just to criticize me. I thought about telling Mike, but he was always exhausted from work. I didn't want to add to his stress. So, when my mother-in-law asked to stay with us while she recovered from her injury, I should have said no, but I didn't want to make things harder for Mike. It's okay, I said, even though I wasn't sure. Mike looked surprised. Are you sure? He asked. Yeah, she needs help, right? And I'm working during the day, so we won't be together all the time. That's true, but will you really be okay? I'll manage. It'll give you peace of mind, right? Thank you, Isabella. We couldn't afford a professional caretaker since Mike's new business wasn't making much money yet. Some months, he barely made $2,000. He worked late nights and weekends, doing everything to make his company succeed. The last thing I wanted was to add to his stress. So, I took on extra work from home while keeping my part-time job. We needed the money, and I wanted to help as much as I could. And just like that, my mother-in-law moved in. The day she was discharged from the hospital, both Mike and I were at work, so she arrived at our home alone. As soon as I got back from my shift, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, she immediately snapped at me. What? You said you were working, but you're here? I just got back, I explained. It's just a part-time job, stop acting like you're important. I'm sorry. Never mind, bring in my luggage and make me some tea. Okay. This was how she greeted me. I was already exhausted, but I had no choice. I forced myself to do what she asked. 3 months passed. My mother-in-law could walk just fine now, but she showed no sign of leaving. She had made herself completely at home. She wandered around as she pleased, even barging into my room while I worked. Hey, Isabella, Why are you playing on the computer when Mike is working overtime? I'm not playing, this is my job, I work from home. Yeah, right, you're probably just wasting time. How can you do that while your husband works so hard? I swear, I'm really working. Don't talk back. A daughter-in-law shouldn't argue with her mother-in-law. Her face twisted with anger as she yelled at me. I wanted to fight back, but what was the point? If I argued, things would only get worse. That night, when Mike came home, he looked at me carefully. Isabella, did something happen? Huh? Why do you ask? You look exhausted. I'm sorry, is this because of me? No, it's just everything piling up. It's my mom, isn't it? It's not just that, but yeah, it's been tough. It's time for her to go back home. I'll talk to her, just hang in there a little longer. Okay. Thank you. The next morning, I woke up to find breakfast already made and the laundry done. In the kitchen, I saw my husband pouring coffee. He must have woken up early and taken care of everything himself. Just then, my mother-in-law saw me in my pajamas and immediately got angry. Isabella, what is this? You made Mike cook breakfast for you? I just woke up, and… Unbelievable, how can you be so lazy? Mike is working so hard for us, don't you get that? I'm sorry. Before I could say more, my husband stepped in. Mom, stop it. But my mother-in-law suddenly acted like she was the victim. Mike, how can you talk to me like that? I'm only saying this for your own good. Mom, don't you understand? Isabella is working too. She's the one supporting us right now. Supporting? She's just working a part-time job. You, on the other hand, started your own business. That's much more impressive. My business isn't doing well yet. We're only managing because Isabella is working so hard. It's okay, Mike. I know what's best for you. Just focus on your work. Mom. No matter how much my husband tried to explain, she refused to listen. She never acknowledged my efforts or even understood how much Mike was struggling. Even after all this, she still refused to leave our home. Every time we asked her to go back, she cried and threw tantrums. Isabella treats me like a burden. I never wanted Mike to marry someone like her. She brainwashed my son. Give me back my son. At first, she only bullied me when Mike wasn't around, but lately, she yelled at me even when he was there. No matter what I said, it only made things worse. Mike always tried to step in, but she never changed. One evening, I was working in my room, waiting for my husband to return. Suddenly, I heard loud footsteps, and my mother-in-law stormed in. How long are you going to sit here playing around? I'm not playing, I'm working. Stop making excuses. I won't forgive you for this. She started shouting again, throwing one cruel remark after another. You pretend to be busy just to avoid housework. That's not true. I'm working to support us. Shut up. A wife who doesn't do housework is a failure. But I do both. What's wrong with that? Don't lie. If you find this life so hard, then just leave. You were never fit to be my daughter-in-law. Something inside me snapped. Not fit to be your daughter-in-law? You have no idea what I've been through. I'm done taking this. I was ready to fight back, but just as I opened my mouth, a voice from the hallway cut through the tension. That's enough. My husband stood there, his face full of anger. Mom, stop it already. How much longer do you plan to torment Isabella? No, Mike, I'm only doing this for your sake. For my sake? My wife is being harassed by my mother. There is no greater pain than this. Why are you saying such things? How can you defend a failure like her as my wife? Don't make me say it again. I only make $2,000 a month. It's thanks to Isabella's work that we can afford to live. My mother-in-law's face twisted with rage. That's a lie. As the argument seemed to go nowhere, my husband suddenly turned to me with a soft smile. Isabella, I'm really sorry. You don't have to be my wife anymore. Mike? Let's get a divorce. If you stay with me, you'll have to deal with this woman for the rest of your life. He was smiling, but his eyes were full of pain. Behind him, his mother smirked in triumph. Seeing that, I knew I couldn't back down. I'm not getting a divorce. Both of them looked at me in surprise. If we divorce now, that's exactly what your mother wants. And besides, I love you, Mike. I don't want to break up over something like this. But, are you sure? You've suffered so much because of her. Mike, you've done everything you could to change the situation. You're not the one who hurt me, your mother is. Isabella, I know you're a kind person, Mike, that's why I'm okay. Hearing my words, he nodded firmly, then he turned to his mother, his expression hardened with resolve. Mom, I'm done being passive. You need to leave this house. Mike, I've had enough. Stop interfering with our happiness. How dare you talk to your mother this way? I'm doing this for your sake. It's not for my sake, it's a nuisance. From today on, I don't consider you my mother anymore. What? This is all your fault, Isabella. She turned to glare at me, still trying to shift the blame. That was the last straw. My fault? Don't be ridiculous, I snapped. Do you know how much I've endured? You called me unworthy, belittled me every day, and now you expect me to stay silent? No more. Where is this coming from all of a sudden? That's what I should be asking. You act so high and mighty, but who do you think you are? I am never divorcing Mike. If I have to fight you for the rest of my life to stay with him, then so be it. I won't let you win. Now get out of our house. How dare you talk to your mother-in-law like this? Mike, say something, Mike. But my husband only gave her a cold stare. Silence filled the room. Then, without another word, my mother-in-law left. Not long after, Mike and I moved to a new apartment. He didn't give his mother our address. Rumors say she's been spreading lies about me to our old neighbors, but no one believes her. Instead, she's been ostracized, seen as a mother-in-law who bullied her son's wife and was abandoned as a result. As for us, Mike's business has finally stabilized, and his income has grown significantly over the past few months. I've also returned to part-time work now that we're financially stable. We know life will bring challenges, but after everything we've been through, I'm confident we can handle anything, together. We will continue working toward our happiness.
My name is Charlotte, and I'm about to share a story that completely transformed my life in ways I never saw coming. For more than 11 years, I had been joyfully married to my husband, Tommy. We believed our marriage was unbreakable, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. I love my job as a remote French tutor, even though it didn't pay much. Tommy hailed from an affluent family, but we never let that influence our simple life. However, Tommy's parents, Harry and Emma, were a different story altogether. Harry was a prominent executive director at a local hospital, and Emma devoted her time to various charity organizations. From the start, they made their disapproval of me clear. Tommy's brother, Benson, was married to Barbara, and they had a 12-year-old daughter named Sophia. Since I couldn't have children, I cherished my time with Sophia, often taking her out for weekends and activities. Over the years, Barbara and I grew close. During one of our coffee meetups, Barbara revealed the extent of the family's wealth. "Charlotte, you wouldn't believe the amount of property and money Harry and Emma have given to Benson and me," she said, her voice low. The revelation was shocking, yet I brushed aside any unsettling thoughts to focus on my family and career. Everything changed when Benson and Barbara tragically died in a car accident, leaving Sophia orphaned. The funeral was a grim event, and I noticed something peculiar about Harry and Emma's behavior. They seemed almost distracted, as if they had more pressing concerns than mourning their son. In the aftermath, I took it upon myself to support Sophia, who was understandably devastated. After discussing with Tommy, I proposed the idea of adopting Sophia. "Honey, what if we adopted Sophia?" I suggested one evening. "She needs a stable home, and we already love her so much." Tommy agreed, and we decided to speak with his parents about our idea. The next day, we visited Harry and Emma in their grand mansion, filled with antique furniture and priceless art. As soon as we mentioned adoption, Emma sharply refused. "Absolutely not," she declared, her eyes glaring at me. "Charlotte is not suitable to be a mother to our granddaughter. We will raise Sophia ourselves." I was taken aback by her harshness. "But I've been a part of Sophia's life since she was born," I protested. "Tommy and I love her and can provide a loving and stable home." Harry intervened, his tone cold. "This isn't up for discussion. Sophia stays with us." Emma leaned in, her voice laced with spite. "Besides, we all know what this is really about, don't we, Charlotte? You're just after Benson's money. How convenient that you can't have children of your own." Stunned by the accusation, I realized that my fight was not just for Sophia, but also to prove that my intentions were pure and that love was my only motive. After the confrontation at Harry and Emma's mansion, I was overwhelmed by a mix of anger and sadness. As Tommy and I drove home, I expressed my disbelief. "I can't believe they'd think so poorly of me," I told him. He sighed, keeping his eyes fixed on the road. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. They're just very protective of Sophia. Give them some time. They might change their minds." But time didn't heal things. Instead, I noticed a troubling shift in Tommy. He started working late more frequently, citing vague, important projects. At home, he seemed distant, constantly on his phone, immersed in secretive conversations. One quiet evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, I asked him, "Tommy, is everything okay? You've been so distant lately." He looked up, his face hard and unyielding. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he snapped. Shocked by his harsh tone, I responded softly, "I'm your wife. If something's bothering you, I want to help." His response was curt. "Just drop it, Charlotte," he growled, before storming out of the room. Despite the growing coldness at home, I found solace in my bond with Sophia. I visited her often at Harry and Emma's, helping her with her French and offering a shoulder to lean on. One sunny afternoon, as we worked on verb conjugations in the sunroom, I overheard Harry and Emma arguing heatedly in the next room. My curiosity was piqued. I listened. "We need to find a way to invalidate that trust fund," Harry hissed. $35 million, Emma. $35 million that should be ours. Not locked away for that girl. Emma's frustration was palpable. "Don't you think I know that? I've got the lawyers on it, but it's not going to be easy." Benson made sure everything was ironclad before he died. Hearing this, my heart sank. They were plotting to seize Sophia's inheritance, the future her parents had secured for her. I left their house in a rush, determined to share this revelation with Tommy. But as I entered our living room, the atmosphere felt charged with tension. Tommy was waiting for me, a stack of papers laid out on the coffee table. "We need to talk, Charlotte," he said, his voice emotionless. Apprehensive, but needing to warn him about his parents' plans, I approached. But before I could speak, he slid the papers toward me. "I want a divorce, Charlotte." His words struck me like a physical blow. I staggered, grasping the back of the sofa for support.
What?
"Why, Tommy? I don't understand." He finally met my gaze, his look cold and distant. "I've met someone else. She's beautiful, intelligent, and comes from a good family. Everything you're not." Before I could reply, he showed me a photo on his phone. A beautiful brunette smiled back, her arm around Tommy. They looked intimate and happy. "This is Eden," he continued. "We've been seeing each other for a while now. I need you to sign these papers and leave tonight." Tears blurred my vision as I signed where he indicated, feeling utterly hollow as if my entire being had been scooped out. "What about the house? Our belongings?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Tommy was dismissive. "We'll sort out the division of property later." Left reeling from the shock, I realized that not only had my marriage ended, but I was now embroiled in a battle for Sophia's future, a fight against those who should have been our family. I nodded numbly when Tommy told me to pack only what I needed for a few days. Heart heavy, I went into what was no longer our shared bedroom but his alone, throwing clothes into a suitcase in disarray. As I zipped the suitcase, I heard the front door swing open and a voice that twisted my stomach in knots. "Tommy, are you home, darling? Did you get rid of hers?" Emma's voice was sickly sweet, a tone unfamiliar but chilling. "Yes, Mom," Tommy responded, his voice distant but clear. "Charlotte is packing now. She'll be gone within the hour." Emma's reply was gleeful. "Excellent. You must bring Eden to dinner tomorrow. Your father and I are eager to meet her properly." I stood frozen in the bedroom, my heart sinking. Their callousness was like a physical blow. With a deep breath, I finished packing, my mind a whirlwind of shock and despair. Descending the stairs with my suitcase, I found Emma still there, her smile wide and victorious. "Charlotte, dear," she said, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "I'm so sorry things didn't work out between you and Tommy. And please, don't bother coming around to see Sophia anymore. It's best if you make a clean break." Her words echoed in my ears as I stepped into the night, the door closing behind me with a definitive thud, marking the end of my married life. Numb. I checked into a nearby hotel, the impersonal room amplifying my sense of isolation. The next morning, functioning on autopilot, I secured a small apartment. It was a stark contrast to the home I'd shared with Tommy, but it would suffice. I immersed myself in work, teaching French online from dawn till dusk, anything to distract from the pain. A week later, my phone rang. It was Sophia. My heart leapt, mixed with sorrow at her voice. "Aunt Charlotte," she began hesitantly, "are you okay? Grandma said you and Uncle Tommy split up." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm okay, sweetheart. These things happen sometimes. How are you?" As we talked, Sophia mentioned Tommy had introduced his new girlfriend at dinner. "She's pretty, but she's not as nice as you. I don't like her." I shifted the conversation to her school and friends, but a sense of unease lingered. Sophia sounded nervous, her voice tinged with anxiety. Over the following weeks, as I tried to establish some sense of normalcy, Sophia's calls became my only solace. Then, one evening while I was grading papers, a text from Sophia appeared. "Aunt Charlotte, I'm scared. Can we talk?" Alarmed, I called her immediately. "Aunt Charlotte," she whispered, "weird things are happening here. There are always strange people coming to the house. They argue with Grandpa and Grandma a lot about money and something called a trust fund. It sounds like they owe them something." Remembering the conversation I'd overheard about Sophia's inheritance, I felt a chill. "Sophia, honey, I want you to be very careful, okay? Don't let anyone know you're telling me this." "I won't," she promised. I've been recording some of their conversations on my phone. As I hung up, my mind raced with worry for Sophia and anger at her grandparents' scheming. I knew I had to do something, but the path forward was clouded with uncertainty and danger. Sophia's next revelation truly caught me off guard. "I kinda got into Grandpa's computer and copied some files," she confided, her voice a mixture of pride and worry. Her resourcefulness astounded me, but the potential danger it posed made me anxious. "Sophia, that's very clever, but it's also very risky. Please be extra careful." The following day, an email from Sophia landed in my inbox, filled with audio files, photos, and documents she had managed to gather. With trembling hands, I opened the files, and the contents left me utterly stunned. The audio recordings captured intense arguments between Harry and various individuals, all demanding the repayment of substantial sums of money. One photo depicted a series of secretive meetings in poorly lit rooms where Harry was seen exchanging envelopes with suspicious-looking characters. However, it was the documents that truly horrified me. There were spreadsheets detailing the production and distribution of counterfeit medicines, falsified lab reports, and forged prescriptions. It was a comprehensive exposé in black and white. As I delved deeper, I uncovered the full scope of Harry's illicit activities. He had established a sham pharmaceutical company that was funneling counterfeit drugs into pharmacies and clinics. Worse yet, these fake medications were being used in his hospital, with bribes given to doctors to conceal the fraud. My hands shook as I closed my laptop, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. Going to the police seemed like the immediate solution, but hesitation crept in. Was Tommy involved? And what about Sophia, living in that house, surrounded by such perilous individuals? As night fell, I resolved that I needed to speak to Tommy. He deserved to know the depths of his father's deceit. Picking up my phone, I dialed his number, my heart pounding with each ring. Finally, he answered, his voice laced with confusion and caution. "Charlotte, why are you calling?" "Tommy, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about your father. There's something you need to know." After a pause, he asked me to meet him. He provided the address of a small cafe on the outskirts of town. As I drove there, a whirlwind of emotions engulfed me. The cafe was nearly deserted when I arrived. Tommy was there, sitting in a corner booth, looking more worn and tired than I remembered. The dark circles under his eyes and the new tension in his shoulders spoke volumes. As I took the seat across from him, He began in a hushed tone. Charlotte, I've been working with the police for months. We're building a case against my father and his entire operation. I stared at him, shocked. But the divorce? Eden? Tommy ran a hand through his hair, a sign of his stress. It was all a cover. I had to distance myself from you to keep you safe. Eden is an undercover officer. We needed a way to get her into the family circle without raising suspicions. My head spun with this revelation. So, our marriage, it wasn't real? No, Charlotte, Tommy said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Our marriage was the only real thing in all of this. I love you. I've always loved you. Pushing you away was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Tears welled up in my eyes, a tumultuous mix of relief and anger swirling within me. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. I couldn't risk it, Tommy explained, his voice strained with pain. My father's network is vast. If there was even a hint that you knew something, you'd be in danger. I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you. As Tommy continued, he revealed more about the investigation. It wasn't just Harry. Corrupt doctors, pharmacists, and even government officials were implicated. The case was expansive, with potential ramifications that extended far beyond our little town. But what about Sophia? I blurted out, suddenly reminded of my niece's precarious situation. She's living in that house, Tommy. She's scared. Tommy's expression grew grim. I know. We're working on a way to get her out safely, but it's complicated. We talked deep into the night, and as we finally parted ways, Tommy pulled me into a tight embrace. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through, he whispered. When this is all over, I promise I'll make it up to you. I held on to him, feeling a mix of comfort and concern, but as I drove home, worry gnawed at my stomach. Despite Tommy's assurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia was in immediate danger. The next morning, my phone's shrill ring startled me awake. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. My heart pounded as I answered. Aunt Charlotte, Sophia's voice came through in a panicked whisper. They're packing. They keep saying they need to get out before it's too late. I sat bolt upright, fully alert. Sophia, listen to me carefully. Are you safe right now? Can they hear you? I'm hiding in my closet, she replied, her voice trembling. But I don't know how long before they... Suddenly, there was a commotion on the other end of the line. I heard Sophia gasp, followed by the muffled sound of a struggle. Sophia. I shouted into the phone, but the line went dead. Panic surged through me. Without a second thought, I threw on some clothes and rushed out of my apartment. I knew I should call Tommy or the police, but there was no time. When I arrived at the house, I saw frantic activity through the windows. Shadows moved back and forth, and I could hear raised voices inside. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door and rang the bell. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the door swung open, revealing Harry's surprised face. Charlotte, what are you doing here? He asked, his voice strained. I plastered on a fake smile. I left some of my things here when I moved out. I was hoping I could collect them. Harry's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but before he could respond, I heard Sophia's voice from inside the house. Aunt Charlotte, help me. Without hesitation, I pushed past Harry and ran into the house. The scene that greeted me was one of chaos. Suitcases strewn about, doors left open, papers scattered everywhere. Emma stood in the living room, gripping Sophia's arm tightly. Let her go, I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. What happened next was a blur. Harry lunged at me, but years of yoga had made me quicker than he expected. I dodged his grasp and made a dash for Sophia. Emma, in her surprise, loosened her grip, and Sophia broke free, running towards me. We almost made it to the door when I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. Harry had grabbed a heavy book and struck me. I stumbled, my vision blurring, but managed to push Sophia towards the door. Run, Sophia.
Get help.
I shouted as I fell to my knees. The last thing I saw was Sophia's terrified face as she ran out the door, then darkness engulfed me. I don't know how long I was unconscious, But when I came to, I found myself bound to a chair in what looked like Harry's study. My head throbbed, and I could feel something warm trickling down my neck, blood. Harry paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "We need to leave now before the police arrive." "What about her?" Emma gestured towards me. Harry's eyes met mine, and the coldness there chilled me to the bone. "We can't leave any loose ends." Suddenly, we heard the distant wail of police sirens. Harry and Emma froze, panic etched on their faces. "It's too late," Harry muttered. "We need to run now." As they rushed to grab their belongings, I struggled against my bonds. The sirens grew louder, a beacon of hope as I fought for my freedom. As I strained against the ropes binding me, I heard the commotion outside, the unmistakable sound of car doors slamming shut and Harry and Emma's voices raised in a frantic, heated argument. Their polished facade was unraveling under the pressure of impending arrest. Just as the ropes around my wrists began to give way, the study door flew open. Tommy burst in, his face a mix of determination and concern, followed by a squad of police officers. "Charlotte," he called out, rushing to my side and swiftly untying me. As the police restrained Harry and Emma, reading them their rights, Tommy enveloped me in a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. When Sophia called me, I came as fast as I could. Leaning into his support, relief washed over me. "Is Sophia safe?" I managed to ask, my voice shaky. Tommy nodded, reassuringly. "She's outside with a social worker. She's shaken, but she's okay." The days that followed blurred into a series of police statements, medical examinations, and restless nights. The doctors diagnosed me with a mild concussion from the blow Harry had dealt, but they assured me of a full recovery. As I lay in the hospital bed, Tommy by my side, we watched the unfolding news on the small TV in the corner of my hospital room. The arrest of Harry, a prominent community figure, had ignited a media firestorm. Headlines decried the counterfeit drug king and hospital of horrors. "The scale of this operation is unprecedented," a grim-faced police chief announced at a press conference. "We're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars in damages and countless lives put at risk." As we absorbed the news, reliving the harrowing events, a knock at the door interrupted us. A tall, serious-looking woman in a suit entered. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison," she introduced herself crisply. "I'm Detective Malaya. I'm leading the investigation into your father's operation. I was hoping I could ask you both a few questions." Over the next hour, Tommy and I recounted everything we knew. Tommy detailed his covert involvement with the police, while I relayed the information Sophia had uncovered and the dramatic events leading to my confrontation with Harry and Emma. Detective Malaya listened intently, taking meticulous notes. Once we finished, she regarded us with a blend of admiration and concern. "You've both been through a lot," she observed, "and I'm afraid it's not over yet. The trial is going to be long and difficult. Are you prepared for that?" Tommy and I exchanged a determined look. "We'll do whatever it takes to see justice done," I stated firmly. Detective Malaya nodded, promising to keep us updated, and left. Soon after, another visitor arrived, Sophia, accompanied by her social worker. "Aunt Charlotte," she cried, rushing to my bedside and embracing me tightly. I was so scared. "I thought they were going to hurt you." Holding her close, I felt her small body shake with sobs. "It's okay, sweetheart.
You were so brave.
You saved us all. But we have another long battle ahead of us." And a long battle it was. The case dragged on for over 3 years, consistently making headlines nationwide. As I healed and we all tried to piece our lives back together, the looming trial shadowed our every moment. Finally, after months of testimony and the presentation of overwhelming evidence, the verdict was handed down. Harry and Emma received lengthy prison sentences, and all their assets, including the trust fund intended for Sophia, were seized as proceeds of crime. As we stepped out of the courthouse following the sentencing, I felt a complex mix of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but at such a cost. The lives of many, including those I had once considered family, were irrevocably damaged. After the dust settled from the trial, Tommy and I focused on rebuilding our lives, with Sophia at the heart of our new beginning. The adoption process was an intense flurry of paperwork and interviews, but it was a whirlwind we navigated with hearts full of hope and determination, eager to give Sophia the stable, loving home she deserved. After a lengthy journey through the legal system, we finally found ourselves before a judge who recognized us as Sophia's official guardians. Walking out of the courthouse, with Sophia's hands in ours, a wave of emotions overtook me. "We did it," I whispered to Tommy, my eyes glistening with tears. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze, affirming, "Now we're truly a family." With the title of guardian came the duty to manage Sophia's substantial inheritance left by her parents. The responsibility was immense, but we were resolved to handle it wisely. During one of our evening discussions, Tommy broached a practical suggestion as we sifted through the financial papers. "How about renting out her parents' house?" he proposed. I nodded in agreement. "That's a smart move." The rental income could fund her college education. We set out to find dependable tenants and established a savings account specifically for Sophia's future, providing her with the security and prospects she deserved. Life settled into a new rhythm, and one evening, Tommy came to me, his eyes filled with hope and a hint of nervousness. "Charlotte," he started, holding my hands tenderly, "the challenges of these past few years have only proven our strength as a couple. I have to ask, would you marry me once more?" My heart swelled with happiness, and without a moment's delay, I responded joyously. We planned a small, intimate wedding with just our nearest and dearest. On the day of the ceremony, dressed in a bright blue gown symbolizing hope and fresh starts, I felt an excitement I hadn't felt in years. Sophia, looking lovely in her bridesmaid dress, exclaimed, "Aunt Charlotte, you look like a princess." We shared a joyful twirl before heading to the venue. There, seeing Tommy waiting for me, his gaze full of love, was like living our first wedding anew, but deeper because of all we had endured. The ceremony was simple yet touching, framed by the presence of our family and friends and the radiant smile of Sophia standing by us. I knew in my heart this was precisely where I belonged. At the reception, as Tommy and I danced our first dance, he whispered, "How does it feel to be Mrs. Harrison again?" I looked up at him, beaming, even better than the first time. Watching Sophia later, dancing happily with her friends, I felt a profound contentment. Though our path had been fraught with challenges, we had emerged stronger. As life returned to its normal flow, with me back to tutoring French students online, I cherished our new normal, filled with love, laughter, and the joy of our small, resilient family. "8 months ago, my husband William blindsided me with the news that he had impregnated his mistress, and thus, we needed to separate. He delivered this life-altering message casually, leaving me completely shocked and drained of any feelings I once had for him. "Is the mistress someone I know?" I asked. "Yes, it's Elizabeth. You met her at Nova's wedding reception," he replied. The revelation stung even more knowing the affair had been ongoing since Nova's wedding, which was almost 3 years ago. Nova, a college friend of mine, and Elizabeth, a junior from our days at university, were both part of the same research group. I remembered Elizabeth. She was the one we all called Little Devil behind her back, a nickname that seemed all too apt now. Reflecting on the past, I realized how unashamed William had been. Time indeed flies, and so has my husband's integrity, it seemed. I am Mia, 31 years old. I met William through the college tennis club where he, being 4 years my senior and an alumnus, would often return to mingle. He was charismatic, always surrounded by friends, and particularly attentive to the newcomers, especially the girls. His friendly nature had charmed me, but it became clear after we married that his kindness was not as all-encompassing as I had believed. William's true nature slowly unveiled itself once I began working. The reason he spent so much time at the tennis club wasn't out of some alumni loyalty. It was because he was largely overlooked at his job due to his incompetence. He lacked serious responsibilities, which gave him ample free time, and there was no sign of any career advancement on his horizon. I had hoped marriage would change him, but his persistent refusal to grow forced me to give up. The only reason I hadn't pursued a divorce sooner was out of respect for his genuinely decent parents. Now, facing the reality of his infidelity and the impending arrival of a child from that betrayal, William proposed a quick separation. "You can keep the apartment. I'll leave," he said with a dismissive ease that only fueled my resolve. As I approached my 40s, the desire for a child of my own grew stronger, contrasting sharply with the life I was currently leading. Earning more than my aimless husband, I was more than capable of supporting myself. It was clear that this painful revelation was not just the end of our marriage, but an unexpected push toward a new beginning for me. At my company, we had excellent parental and maternity leave policies, which made me feel ready to start a family. However, despite my readiness, having a baby just wasn't happening, and the emotional toll was significant. To make matters worse, my affection for my husband had evaporated after discovering his affair and the pregnancy that resulted from it. I was determined to end our marriage cleanly and permanently. The fact that my husband didn't even apologize for his actions only fueled my anger. He laid out his needs and demands without a hint of regret, making it clear that our long-standing relationship needed to end. My next steps were straightforward: hire a lawyer, seek compensation, and begin the property division process. I was also prepared to involve Elizabeth in the legal proceedings. But I don't have that kind of savings, and Elizabeth's pregnant. I don't want to stress her out, my husband protested weakly. "Well, then, you should take on the debt yourself. It's your affair that's led us here, so you need to take full responsibility," I countered firmly. Faced with my resolute stance, he eventually conceded, suggesting he might ask his father to help with the debts. As I moved forward with the divorce, my in-laws intervened, calling me repeatedly to plead for reconciliation. My father-in-law even broke down, fearing for his son's future without me, while my mother-in-law treated me with affection, imploring me to reconsider as she loved me like her own daughter. However, after laying bare the extent of my husband's infidelities and his general irresponsibility at home, even they came to understand my decision. "We are truly sorry," they admitted, their disappointment evident. They ended up paying the compensation on behalf of their son, who lacked the funds himself, and sternly warned him not to depend on them financially again. I often wondered how such responsible and decent parents could have raised a son who turned out so carelessly irresponsible. Following the divorce, I moved back to my recently relocated family home. The process, which I had anticipated to be a hassle, concluded more swiftly than expected. Half a year passed, and life settled into a new rhythm of work and home responsibilities. Then one day, my friend Nova called, clearly upset. "Mia, did you hear? Your ex-husband William and Elizabeth are now flaunting their new life in a high-rise apartment. And get this, Elizabeth invited me to a lavish baby shower, where gifts are expected to be over $200 and there's a hefty entry fee too." "Can you believe that?" she exclaimed. I hadn't even known that Elizabeth had given birth. The news was a shock, but it also reaffirmed my decision to leave that chapter of my life firmly in the past. I was baffled when Nova told me that Elizabeth had invited her to the baby shower. It made no sense. Both my ex-husband, William, and Elizabeth knew that Nova was my closest friend. Why would Elizabeth reach out to her, knowing full well that Nova would share everything with me? As I shared my confusion, Nova's frustration boiled over. "She did it deliberately. That awful woman actually gloated to me, saying she's so happy now that you and William split. She's the worst," Nova fumed, eager to confront Elizabeth about her manipulative behavior. Elizabeth, who we used to call the little devil back in our college days, seemed to have evolved into something far more sinister. In college, she had a reputation for meddling in relationships, unfazed even if her actions caused couples to argue or split. She'd claim with a smirk that if a relationship could be shaken by another person's interest, it wasn't true love to begin with. Reflecting on this, I felt sorry for Elizabeth, pitying her for never having experienced genuine love. However, I was wise enough not to engage with her directly. For now, I chose to keep my distance. My main concern wasn't Elizabeth. It was avoiding any awkward encounters. Nova then mentioned something about the high-rise where William and Elizabeth were living. It's the only new one around. Did you hear when they moved in? She asked. They just got lucky recently when a spot opened up. Someone had to relocate for work right after buying an apartment there, Nova explained. That made sense. As we continued talking, Nova reminded me, Mia, you're moving this Sunday, right? The baby shower is on Saturday, so you just need to be cautious for one day. The building has plenty of elevators, and the entrances are different. We've never run into each other, so it should be fine. However, despite our best-laid plans, I unexpectedly bumped into William and Elizabeth in the elevator hall on the first floor. They were stepping out just as I arrived to wait for the elevator. Our eyes locked. There was no avoiding them now. Hey, Mia, what are you doing here? William broke the silence first. Elizabeth quickly added, with a falsely cheerful tone, Mia, are you here to celebrate with us? You wanted to see our adorable baby, didn't you? Her smile was bright, but her eyes betrayed her insincerity. Flustered by their presumptuousness, I replied, No, I'm just here for the elevator. I switched to a more formal tone, trying to maintain decorum in an awkward situation. To me, William was no longer someone I knew, but a stranger connected to a past I wanted to forget. I didn't want to escalate the situation into a scene. So, you're planning to come to my house after all?
You are so silly, Mia.
Stop being so stubborn. You're probably just jealous that we live in this super luxurious high-rise and that our adorable prince was born. You still love me and feel lonely, don't you? Just admit it. You wanted to see me again, William said, provoking me with his assumptions. Elizabeth chimed in, her tone patronizing. Mia, that's not acceptable, no matter how much you love William. I'm the one he's married to now. It's a crime to barge into our home uninvited. Are you jealous, Elizabeth? You're really cute. So sorry, Mia, but Elizabeth and our prince are a priority now, so you're not welcome here. It had been 8 months since I had seen my ex-husband, and his delusions were as grandiose as ever. Elizabeth, too, seemed utterly incomprehensible. They were indeed a match made in a peculiar kind of heaven. I lamented the years I had spent with William during my 20s, feeling utterly ashamed of having dated and married him. If I had left him sooner, I wouldn't be subjected to this absurd dialogue. My silence seemed to irritate William further. What's that? You're really lacking the charm. Learn from Elizabeth. Even her jealousy is cute. She's just given birth, but still makes the effort to look stylish for me. Don't you think she's admirable? Aren't you embarrassed to be wearing such cheap clothes and no makeup? Not embarrassed at all. I was just going to the grocery store, I replied, my tone calm. I was dressed simply in a clean white t-shirt and jeans. Nothing fancy, but perfectly suitable for a casual errand. That's exactly the problem. That's why I grew tired of you. Enough already. We have nothing to do with each other. Just go home, William dismissed, waving his hand dismissively. Annoyed by my indifferent response, he continued as if shooing away an unwanted pet. No, this is actually my house. That's why I was waiting for the elevator. I corrected him firmly.
What?
Seriously? You're lying, right, Mia? That joke isn't funny at all, Elizabeth said, her expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. I had no choice but to clarify. I've been living with my parents in this high-rise for 8 months now. My father was approached by the salespeople when there was talk of selling the land he owns here. They told him that living in a high-rise would be more convenient than a single-family home, especially as he's getting older. Their stunned faces confirmed they hadn't expected this twist. Living in the same building as them was the last thing they thought possible, and yet, here I was, completely legitimate in my presence, turning their assumptions on their heads. Although the entire ground of the high-rise wasn't originally our land, my family owned a significant portion of it. During the negotiations for the sale, we managed to secure a unit on one of the higher floors for far less than the market value. This revelation shocked William. You are landowners with that much money? If I'd known, I wouldn't have broken up with you. Give me back the compensation money. There was no need for a property settlement, was there? He exclaimed, grasping at straws. That's a separate matter, I replied coolly. The compensation was for your affair, and the property settlement was because we were married. They're not connected. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Elizabeth mumbling to herself, incredulous. I can't believe Mia is living in a high-rise. I thought I had totally won, she muttered under her breath, before glaring at me and snapping. But Mia, you don't have a baby or a loving partner, do you? I haven't lost yet. Look, I was never competing with you, Elizabeth. I'm thankful to you for giving me the chance to break up with William. Oh, and I'm moving out of my parents' place tomorrow, so I don't think we'll be seeing each other again. I informed them, closing the topic.
What? Why?
You just moved into a high-rise, both exclaimed, taken aback. I shrugged. Maybe it's a matter of different values. It just wasn't a good fit for my family. I explained that living in a high-rise came with challenges that didn't suit our lifestyle. We couldn't hang our laundry outside to dry in the natural sunlight and wind, which my mother and I preferred over using a dryer. The higher floors lacked balconies for safety reasons, and only a few windows could open. Additionally, the intense sunlight made our apartment unbearably hot, even with the air conditioning on. The building swayed noticeably even during minor earthquakes, a safety feature meant to prevent collapse, but nonetheless terrifying. Most stressful of all was the crowded elevator rides during the morning commute, which took longer since the elevator stopped on every floor. We decided to move back to a regular house with a garden, I concluded. Luckily, we were able to sell the apartment quickly for nearly the same price we paid for it. Both William and Elizabeth smirked at this news. Oh, so we'll never see each other again? So a high-rise wasn't suitable for commoners like you. It's more suited for an elite celebrity family like mine, William remarked smugly. I couldn't fathom how he reached such a conclusion, but it mattered little to me. His words reflected his unchanged, arrogant nature and reaffirmed my decision to move on from that chapter in my life. The simple truth was that our values and needs were vastly different, and I was content with my choices, unswayed by his shallow judgments. As I stepped into the elevator that had just arrived, I faced my ex-husband, delivering his own words back to him. It was a pivotal moment, a release from the pretentiousness he embodied without the substance to back it up. He was unwilling to change, and I had grown utterly tired of his empty promises and lack of effort. With a deep breath, I felt a sense of closure. It was clear he was beyond changing, and it was time for me to say goodbye. As the doors began to close, I glanced at Elizabeth Hills, who stood beside my astonished ex-husband. In one final jab, I questioned, "By the way, are you sure the child is really yours?" My ex-husband, completely taken aback, could only muster a confused look. "What do you mean?" he stammered. I replied, simply but pointedly, exactly what I said. "Right, Elizabeth? You know what I mean." The doors closed, leaving the aftermath unseen. In truth, during our struggles to conceive, I had undergone medical tests, all of which indicated no issues on my side. I began to suspect the problem might lie with him, but he stubbornly refused to be tested. This was the last straw for me, prompting my departure. Later, I heard from a friend who attended Elizabeth's baby shower. Despite boasting about living in a luxury high-rise, they were actually on the third floor of an average building. Moreover, they had the audacity to demand expensive gifts and participation fees, only to serve cheap snacks. When a guest complained, Elizabeth lashed out, insisting everyone should be grateful just to attend. The situation escalated when my ex-husband tried to intervene, resulting in a heated argument and a chaotic scene, all sparked by my parting words. It turns out they were facing financial difficulties and had resorted to deceit to extract money from friends. The revelation caused outrage, and many friends left the gathering in disgust. As for me, I've moved on to a peaceful life in a single-family home with a garden, enjoying my days with my family and a new, adorable kitten. Our former high-rise was later found to be riddled with structural defects and illegal construction methods, making headlines daily. This news confirmed our timely escape from potential disaster. Now, As I fold the sun-warmed laundry with my kitten occasionally napping on the fresh clothes, I cherish these simple, peaceful moments. Each day confirms my good fortune and contentment, far removed from the turmoil of my past life. Today, like every other, is a good day. Life has a funny way of surprising you, just like that unexpected day when I, Kenzie, accidentally flung a scoop of vanilla ice cream onto a stranger's pants in the park. You see, I'm somewhat notorious for my clumsy mishaps. It was a sunny day, and I was out enjoying my favorite ice cream when I tripped near a bench where a guy was engrossed in his phone. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed as the ice cream landed right on his thigh. Surprisingly, he looked up, more amused than irritated, and then did something I didn't expect. He laughed. "Looks like I needed more vanilla in my day," he joked. His easygoing reaction lightened my embarrassment. I quickly pulled out some napkins to help clean the mess, apologizing for the unexpected ice cream attack. "It's fine, have a seat," he said, motioning to the spot next to him. "I'm Wilson." Grateful for his kindness, I introduced myself. "I'm Kenzie, and I think I owe you an ice cream." We hit it off immediately. It turned out Wilson worked in IT close to where I did my web design from home. We chatted about everything from tech trends to the latest movies. By the time we parted that day, we had already planned to meet up over the weekend. Fast forward a bit, and things with us were fantastic. However, meeting his mother, Mrs. Brown, introduced a new challenge. Wilson had mentioned she was quite traditional, but I wasn't fully prepared for the encounter. As I entered their family home, there she was, engrossed in an astrology book. "Hello, I'm Kenzie," I greeted her, reaching out to shake her hand. She examined me from head to toe, her expression unreadable, then took my hand weakly. "Wilson tells me you're a web designer and work from home," she remarked, her tone suggesting skepticism more than interest. "Yes, I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it's going quite well," I responded, trying to assert my professionalism despite feeling undermined. She hummed, her attention returning to her astrology book. "And your birthday, dear?" she inquired. After I told her, she scanned her book, tracing the lines before tisking. "Oh, that's an unfortunate date. Very challenging and astrologically incompatible with my Wilson." I maintained my composure. "Well, we're doing just fine so far," I countered, even as she smiled condescendingly. "We'll see, dear. These things tend to reveal their true colors eventually," she said, her words laden with implied doubt about our future. The visit was tense. Each comment from Mrs. Brown felt like a subtle jab at my career, background, and even my taste in clothes. It was clear I wasn't what she had envisioned for Wilson. Despite this, Wilson and I stayed strong. After 3 years of dating and navigating the chilly vibes from his mom, we were unshakable. One lazy Sunday, as we lounged on the couch watching comedy films, Wilson turned to me, his expression more serious than usual, a rare shift from his typical grin. "Kenzie, I've been thinking," he began, and instantly, butterflies erupted in my stomach. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Even though my heart was racing, Wilson dropped a line that felt straight out of a rom-com. "I kind of want to spend the rest of my life watching bad movies with you. What do you say we make it official?" His smile was hopeful yet shy, which was unlike him. I laughed, not just out of relief, but because I deeply wanted this too. "Are you asking me to marry you without a ring, Wilson?" I teased. He replied with a playful grin. "Damn right I am, but I promise I'll get you a ring that'll make up for this not-so-grand proposal." As he pulled me into a hug, I realized just how much I loved him. Planning the wedding, however, turned into quite the spectacle, especially with Mrs. Brown offering her unsolicited advice at every turn. One evening, as we were choosing wedding invitations, there she was, hovering over my shoulder like a hawk, scrutinizing the floral design Wilson and I had chosen. "You're not seriously considering this design, are you?" she frowned. "Mom, it's what we want." I like it, Wilson quickly defended. I like it too, I added firmly, determined not to let her steamroll every decision we made. It's your wedding, she sighed, clearly displeased, but remember, the invitation sets the tone for the entire event. The wedding day arrived quicker than we anticipated, and it was perfect, beautiful, even, despite Mrs. Brown's constant presence. Wilson looked absolutely dashing, and as I walked down the aisle toward him, his wide grin was all I needed. Our ceremony took place outdoors under a majestic old oak tree. The officiant was a close friend of Wilson's, someone who knew us both as a couple and not just as individuals. Do you, Kenzie, take Wilson to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? The same vows were repeated to Wilson, and as we exchanged rings, it felt like a triumph, not just over Mrs. Brown's snide remarks or the wedding stress, but against every challenge that had tried to derail us. You may now kiss the bride, the preacher announced, and Wilson didn't hesitate. As our lips met, cheers erupted around us. It felt like a scene from a movie, only better because it was real and it was ours. After living together for 3 years, buying our place was the next big step. We spent weekends touring homes, weighing features, and balancing desires against our budget. One sunny Saturday, we found a house that almost perfectly met our criteria, charming, with a spacious kitchen and a large backyard. The only issue was the swimming pool. I had shared my fear of water with Wilson, a fear stemming from a childhood incident where I nearly drowned. Since then, even bathtubs made me uneasy. But Wilson, ever the optimist, was enamored with everything else about the house. Kenzie, I know it's got a pool, but hear me out. Everything else is perfect, and we're getting it for a steal, he reassured me as we stood in the backyard. I considered his words, taking in the beauty of the home and the incredible deal it represented. Okay, I finally agreed, deciding that the right home, even with a pool, might be worth facing some old fears, especially with Wilson by my side. I was quite clear about my hesitation to approach the pool, and Wilson knew this well. He wrapped an arm around me reassuringly. Don't worry, we'll sort it out. Maybe we could even fill it in eventually. For now, let's just steer clear of it. Moving into our new house felt like a dream realized. The spacious rooms and friendly neighborhood seemed perfect. However, it wasn't long before Mrs. Brown, who was always keen to voice her opinions, especially regarding financial matters and my career, decided to visit. As she toured our living room, her scrutinizing gaze didn't miss a beat, and her pursed lips were a prelude to the skepticism that soon followed. It's quite a spacious house, isn't it? Must have cost a fortune. Wilson, are you sure you can manage the mortgage payments? Wilson, always the diplomat, attempted to ease the tension. Mom, Kenzie, and I both pitched in for the house. It's not all on me. Feeling the need to defend my contribution, I added, that's right, Mrs. Brown. I also work, you know. My web design job pays well and contributed significantly to our ability to purchase this place. She scoffed, dismissing my profession. Working from home on your computer all day? That sounds more like a hobby than a real job. The rest of her visit blurred into a series of tense smiles and swiftly changed topics. Once she left, I exhaled a long-held breath, and Wilson comforted me. Ignore her, Kenzie. We know our truth. We're in this together, and that's what counts. As weeks passed, our house truly began to feel like home. I established my home office, which became my sanctuary, handling web design projects that not only paid well but also reinforced my capability and contribution to our shared dream. Wilson took care of the yard and the pool, which I avoided. It was another sunny afternoon when Mrs. Brown dropped by under the pretense of delivering some of Wilson's childhood items, but her true intentions soon became apparent. While attempting small talk in the backyard, her gaze drifted to the pool and she questioned, Kenzie, I never see you or Wilson swimming. Don't you use the pool? Caught off guard, I decided to be honest. Actually, I'm scared of water. I had a traumatic experience as a child and almost drowned. I've been uneasy around pools and large bodies of water ever since. Her expression morphed into one of disbelief or disdain. It was hard to tell which. That's quite unusual, isn't it? A grown woman afraid of a little water, she scoffed, and embarrassment flushed my cheeks. I attempted to laugh it off, but the discomfort lingered. Later, I learned that our conversation was more than just awkward. It was the start of a gossip chain. Mrs. Brown, in her so-called wisdom, had shared my fear with her friends and family, embellishing the tale to portray me as mentally unstable. Due to my water phobia, rumors about my fear circulated back to me through a friend who had heard from another person. Kenzie, is it true what they're saying? That you're too scared to even look at your pools? Feeling hurt and betrayed, I discussed the matter with Wilson, who was equally surprised by the gossip. He did what? That's it, I'm talking with her. This needs to stop, Wilson asserted, confronting his mother about the spreading rumors. The confrontation escalated quickly. He made it clear that her actions were completely unacceptable. However, Mrs. Brown's reaction was even more defensive. She accused me of manipulating her son and trying to isolate him from her. One afternoon, she called me directly, her voice shrill and accusatory. You're just trying to exclude me from the house. What are you hiding, Kenzie? Are you meeting someone else while my son is at work? Her words were deliberately hurtful, and I was taken aback. Mrs. Brown, that's absolutely unfounded. I would never cheat on Wilson. You know that, I responded, but her fury was unrelenting. Oh, I know your type. You think you're clever, but I see through your games, she retorted. After informing Wilson about the call, he was incredulous. She said, what? That's insane, Kenzie. You know that's not true, and I know it's not true, he reassured me, trying to lighten the mood with a laugh. However, I couldn't shake off how deeply his mother's words had affected me. Wilson agreed that it was time to establish firmer boundaries. We decided that his mother's visits would be less frequent, and he would be present whenever she came over to mediate any potential issues. However, life took a strange turn a few weeks after our last confrontation with Mrs. Brown. I began to notice odd occurrences, small things that might seem trivial to others, but to me felt like ominous signs. It started with a sense of being watched. This first happened at the grocery store. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck made me feel as though someone's eyes were intently focused on me. Turning around, I'd catch fleeting glimpses of people looking away. Then at the laundromat, the feeling resurfaced. I was folding clothes when that eerie sensation crept up again. Looking up quickly, I saw a man standing across the street, staring directly at me. I blinked and he vanished. You're being paranoid, Kenzie, I muttered to myself as I hurriedly packed my clothes. The real shock came one evening at home while Wilson was still at work. Engrossed in some web design tasks, I felt that unnerving stare again. Peering out the window, I saw the same man from the laundromat, faintly visible under the dim streetlight, unmistakably watching. Panic set in. I called Wilson, my voice trembling. Wilson, I think someone's been following me. I've seen him a few times now. Wilson's response was soothing yet unsettlingly calm. Kenzie, love, you're probably just tired. You've been working hard. Why don't you take a break? Despite trying to accept Wilson's rational explanations, the disquieting feeling persisted. I took up yoga and meditation, hoping to find some peace, but the anxiety of being watched remained unshakable. Then, one evening as I was leaving the grocery store, it happened again. As he appeared again in the parking lot, I was prepared this time. Quickly, I pulled out my phone and captured a photo before he could disappear. Now, I had tangible evidence, not just uneasy nerves. That evening, when I showed the photo to Wilson, I saw realization dawn on him. Okay, that's definitely not normal, he acknowledged. Later, as we walked home from a nearby restaurant, Wilson's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the arm of a passerby. It was the man from the photo. Why are you following my wife? Wilson demanded, his voice filled with tension, his grip firm. The man, caught off guard, his eyes shifting nervously, finally let out a resigned sigh. Look, I'm a private investigator. I was hired to keep an eye on her, that's all. Wilson's confusion turned to anger. Hired by who? He pressed. Your mother hired me, the investigator admitted, his tone almost apologetic. She wanted proof of infidelity. Furious, Wilson immediately called his mother. "Mom, what the hell are you doing hiring someone to follow Kenzie? That's it, you're out of our lives until you can act like a decent human being." The conversation was intense, and by the end of it, Wilson was visibly shaken. He apologized to me profusely as we headed home. The next day, determined to protect our privacy, he bought cameras for every corner of our property. "No one's going to invade our privacy again," he promised as he installed them. After the ordeal, Wilson suggested we take a vacation to get away from all the drama. "Let's just go somewhere peaceful, Kenzie. Just you and me," he proposed one evening as we sat on our couch, the silence of our home feeling overwhelming. Eager for a respite, I quickly agreed. We settled on a secluded cabin in the mountains. The fresh air and stunning scenery provided the perfect escape. It was just us, no distractions, no prying eyes. Surrounded by the serene beauty of nature, I felt my stress dissolve. We spent our days hiking and our evenings cuddled by the fire. I was able to breathe, laugh, and simply be myself again. Returning home from the mountains, I was radiant, not only from the sun but also from a newfound joy. I was pregnant. We discovered the news a few weeks after our trip, a happiness profound yet mixed with a hint of anxiety. Wanting to protect our little miracle, I chose to work from home to keep the pregnancy private, especially from Mrs. Brown, fearing the stress she could bring. As my 9th month approached, and it became harder to conceal my condition, Wilson and I decided it was time to celebrate openly. We planned a modest baby shower at our home, inviting close family and friends. Despite everything, I felt it was right to invite Mrs. Brown. Taking a deep breath, I dialed her number, my heart pounding. After 4 rings, she answered. "Hello, hi, it's Kenzie," I said, trying to maintain a calm voice. "I wanted to share some news. Wilson and I are expecting a baby. We're having a little gathering next week to celebrate, and we'd love for you to join us." As I invited Mrs. Brown over the phone, there was a brief pause, long enough to stir a flicker of regret. Then, unexpectedly calm, she replied, "I'll be there." The day of the celebration arrived, and our home buzzed with the warmth of family laughter and the cheerful speculation over whether our baby would be a boy or a girl. I mingled among our guests, often resting a hand on my slightly protruding belly, comforted by the gentle nudges of our unborn child. However, the pleasant atmosphere was soon clouded by my greatest concern, Mrs. Brown. Throughout the event, she maintained a distance, but didn't hold back her harsh whispers, hinting to anyone who would listen that I was faking my pregnancy. "Look at her, barely any bump at 9 months. She's made it all up to trap my son and take his money," she spitefully claimed. To my relief, her words didn't find fertile ground. The guests shared knowing looks and eye rolls, familiar with her relentless criticism and dismissing her claims as just another of her exaggerated tales. Yet, Mrs. Brown was undeterred. "I'll prove it to all of you," she muttered angrily as she left the gathering, her face a mix of fury and embarrassment. Compelled by a mix of dismay and a desire to resolve the ongoing drama, I followed her to the courtyard near the pool. "Can we just talk? This isn't true, and you know it," I pleaded, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. Her face twisted with anger, and she snapped back, "Save it. I know what you're up to." As I turned away, hoping to end the fruitless conversation, I felt a sudden, forceful shove from behind. Losing my balance, I stumbled towards the pool's edge. The familiar fear surged as I plunged into the water, the panic of my childhood drowning experiences engulfing me. As the water closed over me, everything turned dark. When I regained consciousness, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile beeping of machines. Wilson was beside me, his expression drawn and worried. "How's the babies?" I managed to croak out, my voice laden with fear. He gripped my hand, his eyes moist. "The doctors, they had to perform an emergency delivery. He's in intensive care now," he murmured, his voice shaking. Tears overwhelmed me as the gravity of the situation hit. Our baby boy was fighting for his life. The next day, Still reeling from the shock and weak from the ordeal, I urged Wilson, "You need to check the security footage from last night." "Your mom," she pushed me. "It wasn't an accident." Wilson's face registered disbelief. "Kenzie, are you sure? Mom can be tough, but to physically harm you, that just doesn't sound like her." "Just please check the cameras," I insisted, anxiety gnawing at me, fearing he might doubt my words. He reluctantly opened his laptop and accessed the home surveillance system. As the footage unfolded, his skepticism turned to horror. The video clearly showed Mrs. Brown pushing me towards the pool. "Oh God, Kenzie, I'm so sorry. I can't believe she would do this," he stammered, his face turning pale as he realized the truth. Without hesitation, he called the police. The evidence was undeniable, leading to Mrs. Brown's swift arrest. She was charged with assault and endangerment, a stark and painful resolution to a family gathering that had begun with celebration and ended in a grim battle for survival. During the trial, Mrs. Brown's defense claimed that her actions were meant as a joke, an attempt to expose what she believed was my fabricated pregnancy. She argued that she thought my pregnancy belly was a prosthetic and expected it to detach when I hit the water, thus revealing my alleged deceit in front of everyone. However, the video evidence and witness testimonies from the party told a starkly different story. The jury saw through her explanation, dismissing it as an implausible excuse for her dangerous actions. She was found guilty of assault and reckless endangerment. The judge, stern and unyielding, handed down a 3-year prison sentence and ordered her to provide substantial financial compensation for the medical and rehabilitation costs associated with our son's premature birth, a direct result of the stress and trauma caused by the incident. To cover these fines and the compensation, Mrs. Brown was forced to sell her home. As our son navigated his early months, he faced numerous medical treatments and therapy sessions to aid his development, which had been hindered by his early arrival. This period was tremendously challenging for us, filled with frequent hospital visits and constant concerns. Yet, through relentless care and a series of medical interventions, he began to show signs of improvement. Throughout this ordeal, the bond between Wilson and I only grew stronger. Our love for each other and our son deepened in ways I had never imagined possible. As Mrs. Brown's release date drew near, I took a decisive step to protect our family's well-being. I successfully petitioned for a restraining order against her, which prohibited any form of contact with us, especially with our son. It was a difficult but necessary decision to ensure our child's safety and to prevent any further disruptions to our lives. One evening, as we put our son to bed, Wilson shared a tender moment with me, reflecting on our journey. "You know, despite everything, I feel lucky. We have each other, we have him, and we have a future," he said, smiling softly. This conversation marked not just the end of a distressing chapter, but also the beginning of a new one, a story of hope, healing, and happiness for our family. My name is Gianna, and I'm here to tell you that being born into a wealthy family isn't always as glamorous as it seems. Despite the financial comfort, my early years were anything but a fairy tale. From the moment I arrived, I seemed to be more of a burden than a joy to my family, particularly to my mother, Madison. I was a restless infant, always crying, rarely sleeping through the night. Madison struggled to cope with my incessant needs. "Can't you just be quiet for 1 minute?" she would often snap, her voice sharp and cutting. My father, Charles, was the polar opposite of my mother. He was the warmth and kindness of our home. Every evening, he would rescue me from my mother's frazzled arms with a gentle smile, calling me his princess and creating a safe haven from the tension. He'd walk me around our large, echoing house, sharing details of his day as if I could grasp every word, his voice always soothing. Dinner times were particularly strained. My younger sister Anna, who arrived 2 years after me, was everything I was not, quiet, serene, and the picture of what my mother desired in a child. She was doted upon and praised, the golden child, while I was often met with comparisons and dissatisfaction. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" my mother would lament. It hurt, but my father was always there to soften the blow, insisting that my spirited nature was not a flaw but a part of who I was. As I grew, the differences in how my parents treated Anna and me became even more pronounced. My father became my ally, teaching me simple tasks like setting the table or folding laundry, which became our shared moments. When I questioned why Mom seemed to favor Anna, my father would sigh, pausing in his chores, and offer explanations that spoke of love's complex expressions. He suggested that some people find it difficult to show their affection openly and that my mother had her struggles. The disparity extended to our birthdays. My celebrations were subdued, marked by simple cakes and quiet gatherings, while Anna's birthdays were extravagant, filled with laughter, presents, and attention. As I matured, this division within our family deepened into a chasm that was hard to ignore. It felt as if we lived in two separate worlds within the same house. My mother's world revolved around Anna, with me merely existing on the periphery. "Gianna, clean up your sister's toys from the living room," my mother would command, preparing to take Anna to her ballet classes, as if it were the most natural expectation. "Why doesn't she clean up after herself?" "She's not a baby," I would protest, the injustice of it all leaving a sour taste in my mouth. My protests, however, often fell on deaf ears, deepening the divide and my sense of isolation within my own home. This imbalance shaped my childhood, crafting a narrative of favoritism and resilience in the face of familial challenges. "Because I ask you to, so just do it and skip the complaints," my mother would command sharply, her words slicing the air with finality. In our household, her rules were absolute, and according to her, Anna could do no wrong. For me, school became my sanctuary, a place where I was known for my own merits, not just as Anna's older sister. I had my circle of friends and my achievements, but the disparity of my home life still cast a long shadow over these small freedoms. Listening to classmates chatter about family trips and outings, which were foreign concepts at my home, stung deeply. According to Mom, such activities were frivolous expenses, even though funds always seemed available for Anna's new dresses or ballet lessons. "You're wearing that to schools?" Anna would sneer, eyeing my worn jeans and faded sweater as she flaunted her new backpack. "What's wrong with it?" I'd retort, feeling a flush of embarrassment. "It just looks old, that's all," she'd reply nonchalantly, her tone dripping with disguised disdain. Despite the tensions at home, Dad remained my steadfast supporter. In the evenings, he'd assist with my homework or we'd engage in small projects around the house. It was during these moments I felt truly appreciated. "Gianna, pass me that screwdriver, please," he'd request as we mended an old dresser.
Here you go, Dad.
"Why doesn't Mom see me the way you do? Why am I always left out?" I would ask, my voice cracking with frustration and sorrow. Dad would pause, wiping his forehead. "Life's not always fair, kiddo. But you've got to play the cards you're dealt. Keep your head up and do your best. Things will work out, you'll see." His advice was sincere, but it barely eased the sting of witnessing Anna bask in Mom's undivided affection. On the rare occasions Mom did notice me, it was usually to offer criticism or make unfavorable comparisons. "Gianna, why can't you keep your room as tidy as your sister's?" she would criticize during her brief inspections. "Maybe because I actually use my room for more than just sleeping," I'd snap back, my retort a blend of jest and defiance, masking my deeper hurt. "A smart mouth won't get you anywhere. Try to be more like your sister," she'd reply sternly, her expression hardening further. Realizing that expecting anything different from Mom was futile, I shifted my focus toward my future. "Just a couple more years, Gianna. Hang in there," I'd whisper to myself at night, dreaming of the day I could leave and forge my path, one where I wasn't relegated to a supporting role in my own life. As graduation neared, Dad and I held more serious discussions about my future, always out of Mom's and Anna's earshot. "I want you to go to college. I've been setting some money aside for you," Dad revealed one evening while we were doing the dishes. Really? But Mom said we couldn't afford it because of Anna's college fund, I responded, skepticism laced with frustration in my voice. We'll figure something out for you. Don't worry about your mother, Dad assured, though concern creased his brow. The thought of college became my lifeline, a beacon of hope for a new beginning. But Mom had other plans, blatantly dismissing my aspirations during one of her blunt declarations. Gianna should just stay and work. We need to save for Anna, she announced one day, her tone devoid of any room for discussion or debate. But Mom, I've been dreaming about going to college for as long as I can remember, I protested, my voice a quiet, desperate whisper. No, I've already made up my mind. You'll stay here, work, and contribute your earnings to the family, Mom retorted sharply, her decree slicing through my hopes like a guillotine. The finality of her words was the catalyst I needed. I couldn't let my dreams be crushed that easily. The day after graduation, I packed my belongings quietly. Before dawn, I scribbled a note for Dad, hoping he'd understand, and slipped out of the house, the early morning air as cold as the resolve in my heart. I moved into a small room above a local cafe, where I began working immediately, grabbing every shift I could get my hands on. In the evenings, I took a second job at a nearby store, stashing away every cent I earned. Dad would drop by occasionally, secretly handing me a little extra cash. Keep this for your college fund, Gianna. It's not much, but it's a start, he'd whisper, handing me an envelope thick with crumpled bills. Each night, after my shifts, I'd count my savings, laughing to myself. Look at you, Gianna, like a gremlin hoarding over a treasure. I'd joke to myself, the coins and bills piling up, each one a small victory towards my independence. Years of relentless work, living frugally on canned beans and toast, finally paid off. I saved enough to cover my first year at the local college, where I enrolled to study interior design. That first semester tested every limit. I attended classes by day and returned to the cafe at night. My determination bore fruit when one of my design projects not only won a local competition but also earned me a scholarship that covered my tuition for the rest of my degree. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living, not just surviving, I mused, as my boss at the cafe held up the local paper announcing my award. It looks like those long nights at your drafting table really paid off, huh? Marty, my boss, remarked with a grin. Yeah, it seems like they did, I agreed, relief washing over me. Quitting my second job felt like a luxury, allowing me to focus all my energy on my studies and my job at the cafe, dedicating myself to what I truly loved. College flew by in a whirlwind of late nights, copious amounts of coffee, and unbridled creativity. I thrived in this environment, surrounded by peers who shared my passion. By the time I graduated, I had secured a position with one of the city's most prestigious interior design firms. It felt surreal, like a dream come true. The job was everything I hoped for, and more. As I immersed myself in my career, spending long hours sketching and bringing visions to life, the constant screen time and stress began to take their toll. Seeking an outlet, I started running in the park next to my apartment each morning. It wasn't anything intense, just enough to clear my head. However, I soon realized my old sneakers weren't up to the task. One quiet morning, I visited a specialized sports store to find better running shoes. The store was almost empty, a few early birds milling about. As I browsed the aisles, a sales consultant approached me. Looking for something specific, or just browsing? He asked, his demeanor casual yet confident. Running shoes. I need something durable, not something that'll fall apart after a week, I replied, trying to sound informed though I was out of my depth. He chuckled. I think I can help with that. What's your mileage like? Pretty amateur. Just trying to maintain my sanity with a morning run, I confessed, feeling a bit embarrassed. No worries, we've all got to start somewhere, he reassured me with a smile, ready to help me find the perfect pair. We've all been there, he said with a reassuring smile, leading me to a display of running shoes that seemed more advanced than anything I'd ever worn. We spent the next half hour discussing the various merits of different brands and the types of support they offered. It was evident that he was well-versed in his field, and surprisingly, I found myself enjoying the conversation far more than I expected. As I paid for the shoes, Dawson leaned over the counter, scribbling on the back of the store's business card. "If you ever want more tips on running, or maybe a running partner, here's my number," he said with a casual grin. I laughed, slightly taken aback by his forwardness, but pleased nonetheless. "Thanks, Dawson. Maybe I will," I replied, pocketing the card. True to his offer, Dawson was a fountain of running knowledge, and it wasn't long before our casual morning jogs became a regular part of my routine. Gradually, Dawson and I began spending time together outside of our runs. We'd grab coffee, catch a movie, and spend evenings chatting about everything and nothing in my apartment. Before we knew it, he had moved in, and life felt unexpectedly complete. However, when the conversation turned towards making our relationship official, Dawson hesitated. "I think we're still too young, Gianna. We need to get to know each other better, he suggested. So, I embraced our situation, my new job, my evolving relationship with Dawson, and my morning runs. Life was unfolding on my terms, and I was determined to savor every moment. The tranquility of our Saturday morning was abruptly interrupted by the shrill ring of the phone. My stomach knotted as I saw the caller ID. It was Mom, who only called when things were dire. "Hello," I answered, bracing myself for the bad news. "Gianna, it's your dad. He's very sick. You need to come home." Mom's voice was terse, each word laden with urgency. Feeling Dawson's supportive squeeze on my hand, I quickly agreed. "We'll leave right away." As we arrived at the grand house I grew up in, Dawson whistled softly. "Wow, I didn't realize you grew up in a mansion." Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mom and Anna stood in the foyer, their expressions strained. "Gianna, finally," Mom said coldly. "Your sister and I are in the middle of something important." "Nice to see you too, Mom," I replied dryly, introducing Dawson to their barely polite nods. Without waiting, I led Dawson to where Dad was resting. He looked so frail and pale in bed, and my heart clenched. "Dad." I approached tentatively. "Gianna," Dad's voice was a hoarse whisper. He motioned for me closer. "I need to say something. I'm sorry for everything." I took his hand, tears welling up. "It's okay, Dad. We're okay." We joined the others for dinner, but the atmosphere was unbearable. Mom and Anna casually discussed the inheritance as if Dad were already gone, their conversation filled with cold calculations. "With the accounts, we should be set for quite a while," Anna remarked, her voice unnervingly light. I exchanged a disbelieving look with Dawson. "Excuse me," I interrupted. "Can we not do this right now? Dad's still here." "Oh, Gianna, don't be so sensitive. We're just being practical," Mom chided dismissively. The meal couldn't end soon enough. Dawson and I excused ourselves, the pretense of civility too much to endure. As we drove away, relishing the silence after such a stifling dinner, Dawson broke the quiet. "Gianna, I've been thinking." "Marry me," he blurted out earnestly, his gaze intense. I was stunned, emotions swirling within me at his sudden proposal.
"What now?"
"Yeah, why not? Life is short, we love each other, and we're happy. Let's do it. No big wedding, no fuss, just us." Dawson's simple proposal, coming just after the stark reminder of life's fragility, deeply resonated with me. "Yes, Dawson, let's do it," I agreed enthusiastically. We didn't waste any time. The following week, we stood together at City Hall, exchanging vows in a simple ceremony. There were no guests, just an abundance of love and commitment. It felt profoundly right, like the perfect rebellion against my family's entrenched materialism. In the weeks that followed, the surreal mix of new marital bliss and the grim reality of my father's worsening health defined my days. I made frequent visits to see him, enduring the chilly receptions from Mom and Anna. During one visit, Dad's voice, a faint whisper, carried a surprising weight. "Gianna, when I'm gone, there'll be something for you, a sort of surprise," he said, his weary eyes flashing a moment of urgency. I squeezed his hand, choosing to focus on the present. "Let's not talk about that now, Dad. You need to rest," I murmured, hoping it was just the illness talking. Back at the house, Mom and Anna's conversations increasingly revolved around the inevitable aftermath of Dad's passing. "We need to think about the bills and what comes next," Mom declared one afternoon, her voice as cold and calculating as ever. She spent her days disappearing for hours into beauty treatments and consultations, while Anna, freshly graduated and entirely disinterested in employment, filled her evenings with social gatherings and her days with indolent sleep, oblivious to anything beyond her immediate gratification. The dreaded call came on a rainy Thursday morning. Mom's voice was emotionless as she delivered the news. "Your father passed away last night. We're arranging the funeral for this weekend." The news hit like a punch to the gut. I felt Dawson's arms wrap around me, his presence a small comfort against the vast emptiness swelling inside me. The funeral passed in a blur. People came and went, offering condolences and speaking of my father's kindness and integrity, traits starkly absent in my mother and sister. As the formalities wound down and we gathered in the living room, Dawson unexpectedly broached the subject of the inheritance. "So, what's going to happen with the inheritance? I just want to know what my wife will get." "It's not the time, Dawson," I hissed, my eyes pleading with him to drop the subject. But it was too late. The topic was out in the open, and Mom and Anna eagerly began outlining their plans for the assets, speaking as though Dad's will was already crafted to their benefit. "And the house," Dawson interjected, shifting the focus. "It should go to Gianna. It's only fair." Mom laughed, a harsh, jarring sound. "This house is for Anna and me. You two have no claim here," she declared, her gaze icy. Dawson's demeanor then changed. He turned to Anna with a sweetness that chilled me. "You know, Anna, you've really grown into quite the woman." "I always thought so." I stood frozen as the room descended into chaos, Mom and Anna flattered by Dawson's sudden attentions, oblivious to the deeper implications. I couldn't bear it anymore. With my heart breaking, I walked away, retreating to my father's room, seeking solace in the quiet and memories of a man who had tried to make things right. When I woke the next morning, still in my father's room, I resolved not to let the oppressive atmosphere of the house suffocate me. I headed to the kitchen, determined to keep my composure and face whatever came next with a newfound resilience. As I reached for the coffee that morning, Dawson appeared, blocking the refrigerator with a somber look on his face. "Gianna, we need to talk," he said, his voice sending a shiver down my spine. "What is it now, Dawson?" I braced myself for what I feared would be more bad news. Taking a deep breath, Dawson's next words floored me. "I want a divorce, Gianna. I've fallen for Anna. I'm going to marry your sister," he blurted out, avoiding my gaze. He handed me a stack of papers, divorce papers, already filled out. I stood frozen, the papers trembling in my hands. "This has to be some sick joke," I said, but the serious expression on his face told me it was all too real. I stormed out of the kitchen, calling for Anna and Mom. They walked into the living room, their faces painted with faux innocence. "I wanted to tell you, Gianna. I didn't want to go behind your back. That's why Dawson and I are being upfront now," Anna explained first. Mom nodded, adding, "It's very noble of them. I'm proud of Anna for handling this so maturely." The room spun around me as their words echoed, ball rising in my throat. "Noble? Mature? You're talking about betrayal." I spat out, my words dripping with disbelief and hurt. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed the divorce papers from the coffee table, signed them with a shaky hand, and threw them back at Dawson. "You'll get your things by courier," I declared, my voice cold and detached. 3 weeks later, the day to read Dad's will had arrived. We gathered in the notary's office, the air thick with tension. The civility of my family couldn't mask their greed. Their eyes were hungry and calculating. The notary cleared his throat and began reading the will. "To my daughter Gianna, I leave all my monetary assets, totaling $800,000. The room erupted. Mom's face twisted in rage as she screamed about her debts and the loans she had taken, expecting to pay them back with the inheritance. Anna shrieked at her, accusing her of being old and useless, claiming she needed the money for her lavish wedding with Dawson. Then, as if on cue, they all turned to me, their faces a grotesque mix of anger and desperation. "You have to give us that money, Gianna. It's only fair," Mom yelled, tears streaming down her face, tears she hadn't shed at Dad's funeral. Dawson saw his chance and stepped toward me, arms outstretched, a rehearsed line of regret on his lips. "Gianna, I've missed you. I only ever loved you." I recoiled as Anna grabbed him, pulling him back. "You're mine now," she hissed, her nails digging into his shirt. The notary, disgusted, threatened to call the police if they didn't calm down. "This is a legal proceeding, not a circus. Behave accordingly or leave." Before I walked out, they hurled curses at me, saying I would never be happy with the money. I looked them in the eyes, a sad smile on my lips. "Happiness isn't something you buy or steal. It's something you build. And I'll build mine away from all of you," I said, my voice steady. With the inheritance from my father, I did something I had dreamed of for years. I started my own interior design company. Naming it was easy. I called it Charles's Designs, a nod to the man whose quiet strength had always inspired me. The business started small, just me and a rented space in a bustling part of the city, but word of mouth spread fast. My passion and skills poured into every project, ensuring that before long, Charles's Designs was a name associated with quality and integrity in the community. As my interior design business began to flourish, I found myself hiring staff, scouting larger office spaces, and sketching out expansion plans. Despite the successes, not every day was easy. One afternoon, while poring over fabric samples, an unexpected knock at my door caught me off guard. Peering through the peephole, I saw Dawson standing there, holding a huge bouquet of flowers, accompanied by that all-too-familiar smirk. I cracked the door just enough to talk without inviting him in. "What do you want, Dawson?" I asked, my tone cool. "Gianna, baby, I made a huge mistake. I miss you. I know I messed up, but I know you, I know us. We were good together," he said, his voice soft, pushing the bouquet closer. I glanced at the flowers, then back at his face. "We were good until you decided my sister was better, right?" My voice was calm, but laced with ice. "Look, that was a mistake. I was confused, but I'm here now for you," he pleaded, his eyes searching mine for a flicker of forgiveness. But there was nothing left to rekindle. "Dawson, listen carefully. I wish you all the best, really, but there's no us. Not now, not ever again," I stated firmly. He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off by stepping back and slamming the door in his face. Through the wood, I could hear his muffled protests, but they faded into the background as I returned to my work. Later, I heard through mutual friends that Mom and Anna had been forced to sell the house to settle their debts. They'd moved to a small, cramped apartment far from the luxurious life they had always prioritized over family. As for my business, it continued to grow, and with each successful project, I felt more vindicated in my decision to stand alone. The freedom of being my boss and building something from nothing gave me a sense of purpose and pride I'd never known before. The future was a canvas, and I was ready to paint it with broad, bold strokes. Each success was a testament to my resilience and the satisfaction of forging my path, free from the shadows of the past. My name is Violet, and I am a 36-year-old woman who has spent the last 7 years working at the National Archives and Records Administration. This job has always been fulfilling for me, offering a daily immersion into significant historical documents and artifacts. However, recently I've begun to feel a void in my life. I lost my parents in a tragic car accident when I was in my early 20s, a loss that left me profoundly alone. Since then, I have buried myself in my work, attempting to ignore the deep-seated loneliness that quietly gnaws at me. As my mid-30s approached, the desire for more personal connection became undeniable. I longed for a family of my own. One day, as we celebrated a colleague's birthday, my coworker Sophia invited me to join everyone in the break room. Amidst the festive atmosphere, I observed Sophia sneak peeks at her phone, likely messaging her husband. A twinge of envy struck me as I watched my peers enjoying their personal interactions. William, who was celebrating his birthday, offered me a piece of cake and jokingly suggested setting me up with his nephew, noticing my single status. I appreciated the gesture but smiled and declined politely. Despite several setups and casual dates, none seemed to align with what I was looking for, someone who prioritized family and offered stability. Later that day, as I sorted through files, my supervisor, Mr. David, approached me with a new assignment. A farmer from upstate, interested in acquiring an abandoned neighboring plot, needed our help. Intrigued by the prospect of such a unique client, I eagerly accepted the task. The next morning, I made sure to arrive at work early, taking extra care of my appearance. Despite trying to downplay the significance of the day, Sophia playfully commented on my efforts. Just as we were talking, Mr. David introduced me to our new client, Jonathan. Contrary to my expectations of an elderly, rugged farmer, Jonathan was a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair, dressed casually yet sharply in jeans and a plaid shirt. "Please call me Jonathan," he said with a warm, engaging smile, extending a hand weathered from physical labor. His firm handshake sparked an unexpected flutter in my stomach, but I composed myself and invited him to discuss his project. As we sat down, his presence, marked by a quiet confidence, seemed to command the room. Jonathan was eager to expand his farm and envisioned planting an orchard on the adjacent land. As he spoke about his plans, his enthusiasm was palpable, and his eyes sparkled with ambition. This conversation marked the beginning of not just a professional relationship, but a personal connection that promised to grow just as fruitfully as the orchard he hoped to cultivate. As Jonathan talked about needing to find the owners of the property, his passion was evident, and it immediately captivated me. His enthusiasm for his work was refreshing and infectious. We spent several hours together, diving into ancient property records. Jonathan proved to be exceptionally knowledgeable, asking sharp questions that streamlined our search significantly. As we worked, our conversation flowed naturally. "So, how long have you been farming?" I asked during a quiet moment. Jonathan's expression softened. "Born and raised on a farm. Took it over from my dad about 53 years ago. It's challenging, but I wouldn't have it any other way." There was a hint of something deeper in his voice that piqued my curiosity. "It sounds like there's a story behind that," I remarked. He paused, seeming to decide how much to share. "Well, it's just me and my boys now. My wife, she passed away a few years back." My heart tightened in empathy. "I'm so sorry, Jonathan. That must be incredibly tough." He nodded, managing a sad smile. "It is. But my boys, they keep me going. They're 6 great kids." A wave of sympathy washed over me. "I lost my parents years ago. I know it's not the same, but I understand the weight of loss." The rest of the day flew by as we made substantial progress with the property search. However, it was clear we needed more time. As Jonathan was leaving, he turned back hesitantly. "Listen, Violet, I know this might be unconventional, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime to discuss the case more?" My heart fluttered. "I'd like that, Jonathan." For the case, of course. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan and I met regularly, ostensibly focusing on the property case. However, our discussions often ventured beyond land records and legal documents. I found myself opening up to him more than I had with anyone else in a long time. One day, as we wrapped up our session, Jonathan hesitated. "Violet, I hope I'm not overstepping, but would you like to come out to the farm this weekend? The boys and I are having a little barbecue. Nothing fancy." Excitement mixed with nerves at the invitation. "I'd love to, Jonathan. Are you sure the boys would be okay with it?" He smiled, his eyes crinkling warmly. "They've been asking to meet you. I might have mentioned you once or twice." That Saturday, I drove out to Jonathan's farm, watching the city landscape give way to rolling hills and open fields. As I pulled up to the farmhouse, I saw Jonathan and 2 young boys waiting on the porch. "Violet," Jonathan called out, beckoning me over. Stepping out of my car, I felt a flutter of nerves. The younger boy shyly hid behind Jonathan's leg, while the older one looked at me with curiosity. "Boys, this is Miss Violet from the archives," Jonathan introduced. "And Violet, these are my sons, Colton and Liam." Colton, the older boy, stepped forward. "Do you work with old stuff all day? That's cool." I chuckled, feeling more at ease. "I do. Maybe I can show you some interesting documents sometime." Liam, still a bit shy, peeked out from behind Jonathan. "Do you like chickens?" "We have chickens." And just like that, any awkwardness melted away. The boys took me on a tour of the farm, showing me their favorite spots and introducing me to various animals. Jonathan trailed behind, his soft smile ever present. As the day unfolded, I seamlessly blended into the rhythm of life with Jonathan and his boys. We grilled burgers, played catch in the yard, and ended the evening roasting marshmallows over a fire. As the boys drifted to sleep on a nearby blanket, Jonathan and I sat under the stars in comfortable silence. "Thank you for today," I said softly, grateful for the unexpected connection and the warmth of a newfound family. As Jonathan turned to me, his expression earnest, he spoke candidly. "Violet, I need to be upfront with you. I like you, and I feel you might have similar feelings. But you must know my sons, and I come as a full package. Being a single dad and managing the farm isn't always simple." Taking a deep breath, I gather my thoughts before responding. "Jonathan, I have feelings for you too, and your boys are wonderful. It won't be simple, but I'm eager to see where this journey leads us if you are." Jonathan's face lit up with a joyful smile as he took my hand gently. "I'd like that very much, Violet." The following months felt like living a dream. Jonathan and I became closer, and I found myself spending increasing amounts of time at the farm. His boys, Colton and Liam, quickly took to me, awakening a maternal side I hadn't known existed. One chilly autumn evening, as we watched the sunset from the porch, Jonathan looked at me with a grave yet hopeful expression. "Violet, these last 7 months have been the happiest I've had in years. It might seem quick, but when it feels right, it just does. Violet Thompson, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I answered without hesitation. "Yes, Jonathan, I will marry you." Our wedding was a modest celebration on the farm, surrounded by close friends and family. Dressed in a simple white gown, I walked towards Jonathan, who looked dashing in his suit, with Colton and Liam grinning at his side. However, my joy waned slightly when I overheard a comment from Jonathan's mother during the reception. "She's awfully slender, isn't she? I'm not sure she's suited for farm life," she muttered. "Give her time, Lainey," Jonathan's father reassured. "She'll either toughen up or break." I tried to dismiss their words, focusing on the joy of the day, but a seed of doubt had been planted. After our honeymoon, I moved permanently to the farm, a significant change from my job and city life. Jonathan proposed I quit working to focus on the home and children, and I eagerly accepted, ready to embrace my new roles as wife and stepmother. Initially, everything seemed perfect. I immersed myself in farm life, learning to cook substantial meals, maintain the vegetable garden, and assist with lighter farm tasks. The boys flourished under my care, and I cherished reading to them at night and helping with their homework. However, as time passed, the charm began to wane. The labor was relentless and physically demanding. I hadn't anticipated the extent of effort required to run a farm. My hands, once delicate from office work, grew calloused and rough. Jonathan's parents, who lived nearby, were frequent visitors. His mother, Lainey, seized every chance to critique my efforts. "You call this a proper farm breakfast?" She'd scoff at my cooking attempts. In my day, we have had 3 kinds of meat on the table by now. I tried to shrug off her remarks, but they stung. Jonathan, preoccupied with the farm, seemed unaware of my difficulties. One tough day, as I struggled to guide a stubborn cow into the barn, Jonathan shouted from his tractor, "Come on, Violet, put your back into it. Food doesn't just appear on the table, you know." I suppressed a retort, feeling a mixture of frustration and hurt. That evening, as I looked at myself in the mirror, the reflection of the woman staring back was almost unrecognizable. This was not the life I had envisioned when I said, I do. I had lost weight, my hair was a mess, and dark circles had taken permanent residence under my eyes. The polished nails and perfectly styled hair of my previous city life now seemed like distant memories. As the months passed, the relentless demands of farm life began to overwhelm me. Every morning, I was up before dawn, cooking breakfast for Jonathan and the boys, packing their lunches, and then plunging into a never-ending list of chores, feeding animals, cleaning coops and stalls, and assisting with the crops. One particularly taxing day, I woke up feeling miserable. My head throbbed painfully, and I could feel the fever brewing. But even as I considered the impossibility of taking a sick day, after all, to whom would I report my absence? A sharp knock came at my bedroom door. "Violet, are you planning to sleep all day?" It was Lainey, my mother-in-law. With a groan, I forced myself to sit up. "I'm not feeling well, Lainey. I think I might have a fever." She burst into the room, her expression stern. "Nonsense. In this family, only death is an excuse not to work. Now get up and make me some breakfast. Then there's work to be done in the yard." Stunned and too weak to argue, I dragged myself out of bed. As I mechanically prepared Lainey's breakfast, each movement was a protest from my body. "Here you go," I said, setting a plate of overcooked eggs and bacon in front of her. She took one bite, grimaced, and said, "Overcooked, but it'll have to do. Now get out there and earn your keep." I stumbled outside, my vision blurry and my body aching. The world seemed to spin as I made my way to the chicken coop. As I bent down to clean it out, a wave of nausea overwhelmed me. I barely managed to escape the coop before vomiting. Wiping my mouth, I looked up to see Jonathan watching from his tractor. "You okay?" he called out. I shook my head weakly. "I think I'm sick, Jonathan. I need to lie down." He frowned. "We can't afford for you to be sick right now, Violet. The work needs to get done. Just push through it." Tears stung my eyes as he turned back to his work. I felt so alone, so unsupported. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. That night, as I lay in bed with my fever raging, it was Colton and Liam who cared for me. They brought me water and cold compresses, their young faces lined with concern. "Are you going to be okay, Violet?" Liam asked, his voice small. I managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, sweetheart. Thank you for taking care of me." As the boys left the room, I heard Jonathan's voice in the hallway. "Boys, leave Violet alone. She needs to rest so she can get back to work tomorrow." At that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the life I wanted. This wasn't the family I had dreamed of. I knew I needed to make a change. Just as I resolved to do so, life threw me another curveball. A few weeks later, as I was steeling myself for another grueling day, a wave of nausea hit me again, but this time, it wasn't due to illness. With trembling hands, I took a pregnancy test. As I waited for the results, my mind raced with thoughts of a baby. How could I handle a newborn on top of everything else? When the test showed positive, I felt a tumultuous mix of joy and terror. I had hoped for some respite from the relentless farm work, but now, facing the reality of a new life growing inside me, I was unsure and scared. How would I manage this new challenge in an already demanding life? The following morning, with their departure still hanging in the cool air, I mustered every ounce of resolve. I called to the boys, my voice clear and more determined than I felt. "Colton, Liam, grab your essentials, anything you hold dear." We didn't have much time. As they scurried around, gathering their belongings, I hastily packed a small suitcase for Hazel and another for myself. My mind raced as I planned our escape from the life that had become our prison. This was not just a fleeting decision spurred by fear, but a necessary act propelled by the desire to protect my children and myself from a repeating cycle of despair and disregard. We left quietly, the farm's vast fields stretching out like a patchwork quilt made of sorrows and toils. The boys, aware yet confused, trusted my lead as we drove away from the only life they knew with their father. As the farmhouse faded into the distance, a sense of liberation mixed with an overwhelming fear of the unknown began to settle in. My thoughts were a tangled mess of hope and worry. Hope for a new beginning and worry about the repercussions of our sudden departure. We headed towards the nearest town, where I planned to seek shelter and assistance. The drive was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts, contemplating the gravity of our escape. Upon reaching the town, I contacted a women's shelter, explaining our situation. They welcomed us with open arms and the promise of safety. As I watched Colton and Liam play quietly in the corner of the room provided to us, a deep sense of relief washed over me. We had escaped the suffocating hold of the farm, but the road ahead was uncertain. The shelter offered legal aid to help us navigate the forthcoming challenges, and counseling to aid the boys and me in processing the trauma and upheaval of our lives. That night, as I lay beside Hazel in a bed not our own, I pondered our future. The decision to leave was fraught with uncertainty, but the alternative, the risk of fading into oblivion under the harsh demands of farm life, was far worse. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I clung to the hope that one day we would all look back on this moment not just as an escape, but as the first step towards a truly new life, one where we could thrive, not just survive. As the boy hastily packed his things, I gathered essentials for Hazel and a few personal items for myself. Among these, I carefully retrieved Elizabeth's diary, placing it securely in my bag. Within an hour, we were in my old car, leaving the farm behind. The boys sat in silence, a somber mood settling over them as they sensed the significance of our departure. Hazel, oblivious to the changes, slept peacefully in her car seat. Using the little savings I had, I rented a small apartment in the city. It was a tight fit compared to the spaciousness of the farmhouse, but it was ours, a safe haven. The next day, I reached out to some old contacts at the archive where I used to work. They were surprised to hear from me, but were immediately supportive. With their help, I located information about Elizabeth's parents. With trembling hands, I dialed the number and was greeted by a warm, elderly voice. "Hello, Mrs. David, this is Violet. I was married to your son-in-law, Jonathan." After a brief pause and a sharp intake of breath, she replied, "Is everything all right? We've been trying to contact the boys for years. Jonathan cut us off after we lost Elizabeth. Can we see them?" It turned out the Davids lived nearby, in a neighboring town. They eagerly invited us over, anxious to reconnect with their grandchildren and to meet Hazel. As soon as we arrived at their home, a wave of warmth and acceptance washed over us. Elizabeth's parents, Scarlett and Michael, greeted us with open arms and tear-filled eyes. "Oh, look at you all," Scarlett exclaimed, embracing Colton and Liam tightly. Michael gently took Hazel from my arms, cradling her with the ease of a grandfather. Once we settled inside, I knew it was time. With shaking hands, I produced Elizabeth's diary from my bag. "There's something you need to see," I said softly, handing the diary to Scarlett. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to horror and then to grief as they read. Tears streamed down Scarlett's face, while Michael clenched his jaw in anger. "We knew something was wrong," Scarlett whispered, "but we never imagined." "Oh, Elizabeth." Just then my phone rang. It was Jonathan. I steeled myself and answered. "Where the hell are you?" he growled. "Get back home now, or I'm calling the police." I felt a surge of courage. "No, Jonathan, I'm not coming back. In fact, I'll be the one contacting the police. Don't call me again." I hung up, my heart racing. Over the next few days, with the David support, I put our plan into motion. I contacted Child Protective Services, providing detailed accounts of the abuse and neglect the children had suffered. Then, clutching Elizabeth's diary, I walked into the local police station. The detective listened gravely as I recounted everything: the forced labor, the medical neglect, Elizabeth's suicide. "This is extremely serious," he said. "We'll need to investigate thoroughly. Are you willing to press charges?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. For all of us, what followed was a whirlwind of activity. Jonathan and his parents were arrested and brought in for questioning. The farm was searched, and more evidence of abuse was uncovered. The boys were interviewed by child psychologists, bravely recounting their experiences. It was heart-wrenching to hear their stories, but I was so proud of their courage. Finally, after months of legal proceedings, we found ourselves in the courtroom for the final verdict. I sat between Scarlett and Michael, holding Hazel close, with Colton and Liam by our sides. The judge's voice rang out clearly. In light of the overwhelming evidence, this court finds the defendants guilty of child abuse, neglect, labor exploitation, and criminally negligent homicide in the death of Elizabeth David. I heard Scarlett's sharp intake of breath beside me. The judge continued, Jonathan is sentenced to 12 years in prison. His parents, Lainey and Nathan, are each sentenced to 9 years. As the gavel came down, I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, vindication, sadness, and hope. This was a new beginning for us, a chance to rebuild and heal from the shadows of the past. As I watched the boys after the trial, I could see a tangible relief in their expressions. The ordeal had lifted a heavy burden from their young shoulders, and our lives began to reshape into something new and hopeful. Elizabeth's parents, Scarlett and Michael, were nothing short of a blessing. They opened their home to us, providing a stable and loving environment as we navigated the turbulent waters of our new reality. Your family now, Violet, Scarlett would often say, her voice warm and inviting as we sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the children play in the yard. The support from Scarlett and Michael was steadfast. They were there through the endless court dates and lawyer meetings, offering not just emotional support, but practical help. Michael took Colton and Liam fishing on the weekends, allowing them to just be kids, escaping the shadows of the past for a while. Scarlett doted on baby Hazel, often singing her the same lullabies she had once sung to Elizabeth, filling our new days with sweet melodies. Encouraged by them, I hired a skilled divorce lawyer, and the Davids, ever generous, insisted on covering the legal fees. The divorce from Jonathan was straightforward, thanks to his incarceration, and it concluded with me gaining full custody of the children and a substantial portion of Jonathan's assets for their support. As grateful as I was for the Davids' hospitality, I felt it was time for us to stand on our own. With part of the settlement, I rented a comfortable apartment in the city, close to my old job at the National Archives and a reputable school for the kids. Walking back into the archives felt like a homecoming. My colleagues welcomed me with open arms, and my boss offered a flexible schedule to accommodate my new responsibilities as a single mother. Enrolling Colton and Liam back in school was a bittersweet milestone. They were excited yet nervous, having been away from formal education for some time. Hazel began attending a nearby daycare. I still remember the lump in my throat watching them head off on their first day, their backpacks looking oversized on their small backs. Scarlett and Michael continued to be a vital part of our lives, visiting often. Their presence was a constant reminder of the family we had become. They treated all 3 children with equal love, offering the grandparental affection they had been unjustly denied for too long. One Sunday, as we relaxed in the living room after a hearty family lunch, Michael cleared his throat, looking slightly nervous. "Violet, Scarlett, and I have been talking," he began. "We've updated our will. We want you and the kids to be taken care of, no matter what happens." I was speechless, but Scarlett squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You're our daughter now, Violet," she said softly, "and those are our grandchildren. We want to make it official." Tears welled up in my eyes as the full weight of their words hit me. This was what family was meant to be, a circle of unconditional love and unwavering support. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my children and these 2 incredible individuals who had embraced us so fully, a profound sense of peace settled over me. We were truly home, surrounded by love that knew no bounds. My name is Gloria, and I'm 30 years old. I'm an accountant, and I've always been someone who values order and predictability in life. I like things to be planned out, and I find comfort in routines. But everything changed when life introduced me to someone unexpected, Aiden. It all started at a mutual friend's birthday party. As soon as I walked in, I spotted him across the room. He was laughing loudly, the center of attention, effortlessly drawing people to him. I, on the other hand, was content to remain in the background, keeping to myself. But my friend Kenna had other plans. "Gloria, you have to meet Aiden. He's hilarious," she insisted, practically dragging me over to him. I remember thinking to myself, this is going to be awkward, but when I approached him, I was surprised. Aiden was relaxed and easygoing. His laughter was contagious, and before I knew it, I was laughing more in that one evening than I had in months. "Hey, I'm Aiden. And you are?" he asked with a smile that lit up his face. "Gloria. Nice to meet you," I replied, a little more eagerly than I expected. Aiden cracked a joke about how accountants are secretly wild party animals in disguise, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. The rest of the evening was spent in easy conversation. Aiden was into graphic design, loved indie music, and had a passion for cooking. I left the party feeling lighter and happier. Aiden had this amazing way of making everything feel fun and exciting. Over the next few weeks, we started seeing a lot of each other. He'd surprise me with takeout from the coolest new restaurant in town, or tickets to a concert I hadn't even known about. "Life's too short for routines, Gloria. You've got to mix it up," he'd say with a grin. I was drawn to his spontaneity, a complete contrast to my organized and structured life. Aiden had this natural ability to pull me out of my comfort zone, and I loved it. But as time passed, I began to notice things that made me uneasy. He would spend money carelessly, casually dropping $100 on a night out without a second thought. He'd hop from one job to another whenever he got bored. I decided to talk to him about it one evening, when we were at my place. "Aiden, don't you think you should be a little more careful with money? Maybe try sticking with a job a bit longer?" I asked, choosing my words carefully. He just laughed it off. "Gloria, you worry too much. Life's all about having fun. Money and jobs, they come and go." I wanted to argue, to explain that life doesn't always work that way, but I didn't. Instead, I told myself that it was just Aiden being Aiden, and I let it slide. When Aiden proposed, it came completely out of the blue. We were walking through the park one afternoon, and without any warning, he blurted out, "Marry me, Gloria. Let's make this adventure official." It was impulsive, irrational, and so Aiden. But despite the whirlwind nature of it all, I said yes. We moved in together, and I thought this would be the perfect start to our life as a couple. Maybe, just maybe, opposites really could attract and hold everything together. However, over time, the carefree, adventurous spirit that I had once loved about Aiden began to feel more like a growing divide between us. The reality of his laid-back attitude started to clash with my more cautious, responsible nature. The first big crack in our relationship came on a Thursday evening. I had stayed late at work, catching up on some complicated accounts. I was exhausted and starving as I arrived home, looking forward to a quiet night. But instead, I was met with chaos. The living room was covered in bags from various stores, and Aiden was lounging on the couch, wearing a self-satisfied grin. "Gloria, you're home. Check out these amazing deals I found today," he exclaimed, waving his arms toward the piles of shopping bags. I dropped my keys on the table, feeling a tight knot form in my stomach. "Aiden," I said, trying to stay calm. "We talked about this last week. We need to save money and cut down on unnecessary expenses." He just shrugged and flipped through a magazine as if nothing was wrong. Yeah, I know," he mumbled, not really listening. At that moment, I realized that the gap between our worlds was growing wider. I had always been the one to plan and stay responsible, while Aiden seemed to live in the moment, oblivious to the consequences. And as much as I loved the excitement he brought into my life, I began to wonder how long I could live in a world that felt so unstable. It was clear Aiden didn't see the problem. "But these were on sale, and we needed some of these things," he said, trying to defend his purchases. I picked up a receipt from one of the bags and felt my heart sink. "Aiden, these are luxury items, not essentials. We have a budget for a reason." I could feel the stress rising inside me. He looked up at me, his expression shifting from casual to defensive. "Come on, Gloria. Don't be such a killjoy. We deserve to treat ourselves once in a while." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not about being a killjoy, Aiden. It's about being responsible. We have bills to pay, a mortgage, and we agreed we would save for emergencies. He rolled his eyes, tossing the magazine aside with a sigh. You always make a big deal out of everything. Can't you just relax for once? I felt a pang of frustration, but I didn't want to argue. This wasn't just about the shopping. It was about something much bigger. Then one morning, I found an envelope on the dining table addressed to Aiden. It was from his workplace. I was curious and opened it, and as I read the contents, my heart sank. Aiden had resigned from his job, without even telling me. When he came downstairs for breakfast, I confronted him. Aiden, what is this? Did you quit your job? Why didn't you discuss this with me first? He poured himself a cup of coffee, unfazed. Yeah, I quit. That job was a dead end. I need something better. Something that excites me. I could feel my frustration rising. But how are we going to manage our expenses? We need 2 incomes. Aiden, you know this? He shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. We'll figure it out. We always do. You need to stop worrying so much. How can I not worry? I asked, my voice growing louder. We have financial commitments, Aiden. This isn't just about you or me. It's about us, our future. Aiden set his coffee cup down with a thud. I can't deal with this right now, Gloria. You're suffocating me with all this talk about money and responsibility. I watched him walk away, leaving me standing in the kitchen with the resignation letter in my hand. I felt more alone than I had in a long time. At first, I tried to be patient, hoping Aiden's unemployment was just a short-term setback. But as the days passed, it became a persistent source of tension between us. Every morning, as I prepared for work, I'd find Aiden lounging on the couch, either watching TV or scrolling through his phone. It was a painful reminder of our growing financial strain. Aiden, it's been weeks since you quit your job. Have you started looking for something new? I asked one morning, trying to hide my concern as I adjusted my work badge. He barely looked up from his phone. Yeah, I'm looking, but nothing has caught my eye yet. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. I felt my patience snap. The right opportunity? Aiden, we have bills piling up. We can't just wait forever. Finally, he glanced up at me, his expression a mix of annoyance and indifference. Gloria, you need to chill. I know what I'm doing. I'll find something soon. Days turned into weeks, and the situation didn't improve. I began taking on extra hours at work to cover our bills, but the exhaustion started to wear me down. One evening, I came home to find the living room covered in pizza boxes and empty beer cans. Aiden was sprawled out on the couch, snoring lightly, with the TV blaring in the background. I couldn't contain my frustration. Aiden, I called out sharply. He stirred and blinked sleepily at me. What's up? He mumbled, rubbing his eyes. What's up? Look at this mess. I gestured around the room. And dinner? Were you planning to cook tonight? My patience was running thin. Aiden sat up, yawning. Oh, I forgot. Got caught up with the game. Just grab something on your way home next time. The lack of responsibility, the growing strain on our finances, and Aiden's careless attitude were wearing me down. I wanted to fix things, but it seemed like we were drifting farther apart every day. I felt a wave of frustration and anger wash over me. I'm working extra hours just to make ends meet, Aiden. The least you could do is help around the house. I said, my voice tight with exhaustion. He stretched lazily and stood up, completely unbothered. I didn't ask you to work extra, he replied. You're choosing to stress yourself out. Choosing to stress out. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Aiden, if I don't, how are we going to survive? You're sitting here doing nothing while I'm out there working to keep us afloat. My voice was rising, filled with frustration. His expression hardened, and I could see the tension building. I'm not doing nothing, he snapped. I'm trying to find a job. You think I like being stuck at home, sitting on the couch all day? You're not even trying, I retorted, hurt and angry. This isn't what I signed up for when we got married. Aiden scoffed, clearly annoyed. Well, sorry for not living up to your perfect standards, Gloria. I didn't realize I married a nag. His words hit me hard. A nag? Was it so much to ask for a partner who actually contributed? A nag? I repeated, shocked by his response. Is it too much to ask for you to help out? I don't understand how you can be so relaxed about our situation. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I need some air, he muttered. I can't deal with this right now. The tension in our home was unbearable. Every conversation we had about responsibility or our future seemed to end in a heated argument, leaving behind nothing but a heavy silence. I was exhausted, physically from working extra hours, and emotionally from the constant strain of trying to hold everything together. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table sorting through bills and trying to make sense of our finances, I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of everything on my own. Aiden, I began, my voice firm but steady. We need to talk. This can't go on any longer. He barely looked up from his phone, his face showing no sign of concern. What now, Gloria? It's about your job situation, or rather, the lack of one, I said, frustration creeping into my tone. It's been months, Aiden. We're sinking here, and you don't seem to care. He let out a heavy sigh. Here we go again. Look, I'm trying, okay? Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I like seeing you stressed all the time? Then do something about it, I said, my voice rising with a mix of anger and desperation. Find a job, any job. We need 2 incomes, Aiden. We agreed on this when we got married. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You think it's so easy, huh? Just snap my fingers and a job appears? You don't get it, Gloria. The market's tough. I need something that suits me. Something that suits you? I repeated, incredulous. We don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect job, Aiden. We have bills, a mortgage, responsibilities. Aiden started pacing around the room, running his hands through his hair, clearly frustrated. I can't deal with this pressure, Gloria. It's constant with you. You're always on me about money, about work. I can't take it. I stood up, facing him head on. This isn't about nagging, Aiden. This is about our life, our future. If you can't understand that, then maybe this isn't going to work. Aiden stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes cold. What are you saying? I took a deep breath, the weight of my words heavy in the air. I'm saying that if you don't find a job, if you don't start taking our situation seriously, then maybe we need to rethink this marriage. The words hung between us like a storm cloud, and for a moment, Aiden said nothing. His face was hard, but there was no apology, no recognition of the gravity of what I had said. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank back into my chair, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't wanted it to come to this. I had hoped we could work through our issues, but the endless cycle of arguments and indifference had worn me down. Days passed, and I heard nothing from Aiden. The silence in the house was both a relief and a worry. Part of me felt free from the tension, but another part of me feared that this could be the beginning of the end. Would he come back? Would we ever find a way through this? I didn't know anymore. Late one evening, as I sat alone in the quiet of our home, my phone rang, breaking through the stillness and jolting me out of my thoughts. I quickly answered, my heart already racing. Mrs. Smith, this is the hospital. Your husband, Aiden Smith, was brought in after an accident. He's stable, but he sustained some injuries. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and before the rest of the message even registered, my mind was spinning. I couldn't focus on the rest of what the nurse was saying. I was too consumed with worry and fear. I rushed to the hospital as quickly as I could, my thoughts a chaotic mix of fear, confusion, and 1,000 questions I didn't have answers for. The sterile, impersonal atmosphere of the hospital felt worlds away from the whirlwind of emotions I was trying to navigate. When I finally arrived and found Aiden's room, seeing him lying there with a bulky cast on his leg and a look of pain on his face struck me hard. This was a version of Aiden I'd never seen before, vulnerable in a way that stirred something deep inside me. As I sat beside his bed, I watched him for a moment, hoping the sight of me would give him some comfort. His eyes fluttered open slowly, and for a brief moment, he looked confused. But then recognition set in. "Gloria, you're here," he said, his voice weak and full of emotion, guilt and relief mixed together. I forced a smile, trying to keep the conversation light despite everything I was feeling. "Yeah, I'm here. How are you feeling?" He winced as he tried to adjust his position. "Like I've been run over," which, I guess, isn't far from the truth. I tried to hold back my own emotions. "The doctor said you're lucky. The injury could have been worse, but it's a severe fracture. You'll need time to heal." Aiden exhaled deeply, looking at me with a combination of sadness and regret. "Gloria, I'm sorry. I've been such a fool. And now this." His voice trailed off, and I could see the pain in his eyes, both physical and emotional. I sighed, a mix of frustration and sympathy filling me. "Aiden, we'll sort through all of that later. Right now, you need to focus on getting better." But he wasn't ready to drop the subject. His tone had a hint of urgency, like he had something important to say. "No, I need to say this. I've been self-centered, and I've put you through so much. This accident, it's made me see things differently." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to hear him out, but another part of me was cautious. "I appreciate you saying that, Aiden, but it's going to take more than words to fix what's been broken between us." He nodded solemnly. "I know, and I want to make it right. I'll find a job as soon as I'm able. I'll help out more around the house, whatever it takes." Before I could respond, a nurse entered to check on Aiden's condition. After she left, we picked up where we had left off. "Aiden, it's not just about the job or the housework," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about us. Our relationship. We've been drifting apart, and it's going to take real effort from both of us to bridge that gap." He reached out, taking my hand gently in his. "I know I've messed up, Gloria, but lying here, all I can think about is you. How much you mean to me, and how I've taken you for granted." His words hit me deeply. They were touching, but I couldn't shake the caution that had built up over the months. "I want to believe you, Aiden. I really do. But we've had so many false starts. I need to see that you're serious about making a change." Before he could respond, the nurse returned with a cheerful demeanor, completely at odds with the heavy mood in the room. "We're going to start some mild physical therapy soon. It will be a journey, but you're in good hands," she said, before leaving us alone again. After she was gone, Aiden looked at me with a new resolve in his eyes. "I know it's going to be a long road, but I want you with me, Gloria. If you're willing to give me that chance." Bringing Aiden home from the hospital marked the beginning of a new, challenging chapter in our lives. His broken leg meant he was confined to either the bed or the couch for the foreseeable future, and his dependence on me for even the simplest tasks was a stark change from the independent person he had once been. The first few days were a whirlwind of adjusting to this new routine. I had to juggle my work commitments with playing nurse to Aiden, all while trying to stay calm and focused. It was exhausting. One evening, after an especially long day at work, I walked through the door, ready to collapse from exhaustion. I came home one evening, exhausted from work, only to find Aiden staring at the TV with a frown on his face. "Aiden, how are you feeling? Do you need anything?" I asked, dropping my bag on the floor and kicking off my shoes. He turned his head to look at me, his expression sour. "Where have you been? I've been calling out for help to get to the bathroom, and you are nowhere to be found." A wave of guilt washed over me, mixed with frustration. "Aiden, I had to stay late at work. You know how demanding my job is. I can't just leave whenever I want." He scoffed, his voice dripping with resentment. "Well, maybe your job shouldn't be more important than your husband." As the days went on, Aiden's demands grew. He expected specific meals at specific times, his medication to be handed to him exactly when he needed it, and constant attention. If anything was off, he made sure to voice his displeasure. One Saturday, I spent hours preparing his favorite dish, hoping it would lift his spirits. When I finally set the plate down in front of him, he barely looked at it before looking up at me with disdain. "This is what you made. It's too salty. Can't you do anything right?" I felt my patience snap. Aiden, I've been running around all day, trying to take care of you and keep up with everything else. A little appreciation wouldn't hurt. He sneered and pushed the plate away. Appreciation? I'm stuck in this bed because of my leg, and all I ask for is a decent meal. My hands trembled with anger. You know what, Aiden? I'm not your servant. I'm your wife, and I deserve some respect. His eyes flashed with anger, and he shot back. Respect? You want respect? How about respecting my condition? I'm the one who's suffering here. I walked away to cool down, but the words stung deeply. I realized something was changing in Aiden. The sweet, apologetic person I had seen in the hospital seemed to have vanished. In his place was someone who seemed to take pleasure in belittling me at every turn. Then one day, I returned home from work earlier than usual. The house, usually quiet at this time of day, was filled with the unexpected sound of laughter coming from Aiden's room. My heart pounded, and a sense of dread filled me as I tiptoed closer. Peering through the slightly open door, I saw Aiden sitting up, animated and cheerful, chatting on the phone. "Oh yeah, I've settled in quite well here," he said with a laugh. Gloria doesn't have a clue. I froze. My breath caught in my throat.
Who was he talking to? What was he talking about?
A cold shiver ran down my spine as his words replayed in my mind. I quickly backed away, my mind racing. Then, to cover my shock, I slammed the door to announce my presence and walked into his room with a composed expression. Aiden quickly changed his demeanor when he heard the door slam. He ended the call abruptly, feigning weakness. "Gloria, you're back," he said, his voice a little too sweet. "How are you feeling?" I asked, masking my turmoil with a concerned smile. "Just the same," he replied, avoiding my gaze. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I contacted a private detective I knew from a previous work case. "I need you to find out everything about my husband's activities," I told him over the phone. "And there's a woman he might be involved with." While the detective did his work, I kept up the appearance of being the dutiful wife. It was agonizing, pretending everything was normal when every instinct I had screamed that my world was falling apart. 3 weeks later, the detective got back to me. The news was worse than I had imagined. Aiden had been in an accident with his mistress. Her name was listed in the police reports. The detective gave me the name of the woman. Everything I had feared had come true. Aiden wasn't just failing to meet my expectations. He had been lying to me all along. And now, I was faced with the painful reality of betrayal. A quick search on social media confirmed my worst fears. Aiden's mistress had a profile full of pictures of them together, intimately close, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. But that wasn't all. The detective had uncovered something far more damaging: Aiden's gambling debts. The amount was staggering, enough to potentially drown us financially. I sat in the living room, staring at the evidence of Aiden's betrayal laid out before me. A mix of anger, disbelief, and heartache flooded my mind. How could I reveal the truth to him? How could I make him understand the full weight of what he'd done? For now, I kept these thoughts to myself, waiting for the right moment to turn the tables. As the morning light filtered through the curtains, I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. Taking a deep breath, I walked into Aiden's room, where he lay in his bed, still recovering from the broken leg. I had to stay calm and focused. This was going to be the performance of a lifetime. "Aiden, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, my voice calm but firm. He looked up at me, irritation flashing across his face. "What now, Gloria? Can't you see I'm in pain here?" I held my composure. "I've decided for your better care. You're being moved to a state medical facility tomorrow. They're better equipped to handle your rehabilitation." Aiden's face shifted from annoyance to panic.
What? No.
"You can't do that. I want to stay here with you." I didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, Aiden, but this is for the best. I'll start packing your things." As I turned toward the door, I heard the frantic rustling of sheets behind me and Aiden's hurried voice calling someone on the phone. "She's sending me to some facility. You have to help me." About an hour later, a car pulled up outside and Aiden's mistress barged into the house. She walked with determination and concern written all over her face, heading straight for Aiden's room with me trailing behind. "I'm here to take him with me. He's not going to any facility," she declared, her voice full of ownership. I entered the room, my heart pounding, but my face remained calm. "I'm glad you're here," I said flatly. "This was all a setup to get you to show your hand." Aiden and his mistress exchanged confused glances, their faces slowly filling with fear. "What are you talking about, Gloria?" Aiden asked, his voice trembling. I held up the evidence, the photos collected by the detective of them together. "This is the proof of your affair. I'll be seeking compensation for this betrayal." The mistress laughed, though there was a nervous edge to it. "I can pay whatever you want. He's coming with me." I smiled thinly, confident in what I had to say next. "You should know that he's neck-deep in gambling debts, and without a job, he can't afford his medical bills or insurance. Are you ready to handle all of that?" Her face drained of color as the gravity of my words hit her. Aiden's eyes darted between us, a look of helplessness on his face. "But I can't deal with all that," she stammered, her confidence cracking. "Seems like he's your problem now," I said with cold finality, turning to leave the room. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. I filed for divorce, making sure I received a fair settlement to compensate for Aiden's betrayal and deceit. His mistress, now burdened with his financial and medical responsibilities, quickly found herself overwhelmed. Rumors began circulating about their strained relationship, filled with constant arguments and financial troubles. Aiden's downfall was a direct result of his actions, and now his mistress was trapped in the web of consequences he had spun. As for me, I found peace in my newfound freedom. The betrayal had hurt, and it had shaken me, but it also taught me a valuable lesson about trust and deception. Through all the pain, I discovered a strength within myself I never knew I had. I moved forward, determined to build a life of my own, one free from lies, betrayal, and the shadows of the past. I knew now that my happiness was in my own hands. My name is Chloe, and my passion for fashion has always been a driving force in my life. This passion steered me towards a career in a prestigious boutique, allowing me to delve deep into the latest styles while assisting others in finding their ideal outfits. Despite my fondness for upscale fashion, I've always managed to maintain a practical approach to my own clothing choices. I excel at unearthing incredible deals, browsing through sale racks, and assembling chic yet affordable ensembles. My ultimate ambition has been to become an image consultant, guiding individuals in defining their personal style and boosting their self-confidence. I dedicated countless hours to poring over fashion magazines, attending runway shows, and trying out various styles on myself and my friends. One evening, at a local fashion event aimed at showcasing new designs and possibly forging industry connections, I caught the attention of a certain individual. While I admired a striking outfit on the runway, I noticed a tall, charming man with a professional camera watching me. After the event, he introduced himself with a warm smile as Benjamin, the photographer for the evening. Our conversation flowed effortlessly as we discussed our favorite designs from the show and our mutual appreciation for fashion. Benjamin was not only a skilled photographer, but also deeply knowledgeable about the fashion industry. As we chatted, I was drawn to his passion and creativity. Sensing a spark, Benjamin suggested we meet for coffee to continue our discussion about fashion. Thrilled, I agreed, and we exchanged numbers. As Benjamin and I began dating, our relationship quickly deepened, leading to an introduction to his parents, Samuel and Samantha. Initially nervous, I was quickly put at ease by their warm welcome. Samantha, particularly impressed by my style, praised my ability to blend stunning yet affordable pieces. Samuel appreciated my financial savvy, a trait he considered important. However, not all interactions were pleasant. During my first visit, Benjamin's sister Gemma made it clear she disapproved of my economic fashion sense. Her dismissive attitude and remarks about preferring a lavish lifestyle hurt, especially when Benjamin responded to her rudeness with nothing more than an indulgent smile. The following weeks were emotionally turbulent. One afternoon, while I was absorbed in thoughts about a new styling project, I encountered Gemma again. She mockingly referred to me as the bargain hunters in front of her friends, attempting to embarrass me. Despite the sting of her words, I held my head high, refusing to let her derision affect my confidence in my style and financial choices. But then, I remembered my values and what I stand for. With a serene smile, I responded to Gemma, "Actually, Gemma, you're right. There's a sale on the new luxury collection at Bergdorf's today. You can snag it for half price. Why don't you join me?" The laughter faded from Gemma's lips as her friend's eyes lit up with interest. "Really?" one of them asked, moving closer. "That collection is stunning. I'd love to check it out." Before I knew it, Gemma's friends had gathered around me, eager to learn more about the sale and my shopping tips. We spent the afternoon together, scouring for bargains and exchanging styling advice. As we said our goodbyes, they thanked me enthusiastically, leaving Gemma isolated and visibly irked on the sidelines. A few days later, while I was setting up a new display in the boutique, I heard the door chime. Turning around, I was surprised to see Gemma. She greeted me with saccharine sweetness. "Hello, dear sister. I'm here to do some shopping, and since we're practically family, you'll surely give me a nice discount, right?" Taking a deep breath to maintain my professionalism, I replied, "I'm sorry, Gemma, but this is a new collection. We don't offer discounts on our latest arrivals, even for family members. I hope you understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Gemma retorted sarcastically. "You're just selfish and don't care about family. Wait until Benjamin hears about this." That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Benjamin. "We need to talk. Can I come over?" When Benjamin arrived, his face was serious. "Chloe, what's this I hear about you refusing to help my sister?" I explained the store policy and my commitment to professional integrity, but Benjamin seemed unsympathetic. "Come on, Chloe. It was just a small discount. You could have made an exception for Gemma.
She's going to be your sister-in-law someday."
"Benjamin," I responded, firm yet calm. "I can't compromise my job or my principles, even for family, especially not for someone who has been nothing but rude to me since we met." Benjamin's expression turned stern. "That's just how Gemma is. You need to learn to deal with it if you're going to be part of this family." As Benjamin left that night, a knot formed in my stomach. I loved him, but his unyielding defense of Gemma's behavior was becoming increasingly hard to accept. This situation highlighted a side of him that seemed to always prioritize Gemma's desires above my own needs. The weeks that followed were strained. Benjamin and I attempted to move past the incident, but it left a lingering bitterness. I found myself questioning our relationship, wondering if Benjamin would ever truly support me. One evening, while preparing for a family dinner at Benjamin's parents' house, I received a message from Samantha, Benjamin's mother. "Chloe, dear, I was wondering if you could help me with something. Gemma's been talking about a wealthy man she's seeing, and I'm concerned she's not taking her future seriously. Could you talk to her about wedding planning? You have such great taste and sense." I hesitated, my stomach churning. The last thing I wanted was to become entangled in Gemma's affairs, but I couldn't dismiss Samantha's request. With a resigned sigh, I agreed to her plea. At dinner that night, the air was tense. Gemma was radiant as she boasted about her new beau, flaunting details of his wealth with dramatic gestures. "He's loaded," she bragged. "Private jet, yacht, the works." As I listened, I braced myself for another challenging evening, wondering how I would navigate the complex dynamics of this family. As we discussed spring weddings, Benjamin's eyes lit up when he spoke to his sister. "That's fantastic, Gem. A wedding in the Bahamas sounds amazing. Don't let this one slip away," he said enthusiastically. His excitement stung a bit. He had never shown such fervor for our plans. During the conversation, Samantha tried to steer things toward planning. "Speaking of weddings, Gemma, have you started yours yet? Chloe here has quite an eye for these things. Maybe she could give you some advice." Gemma's expression soured immediately. "I don't need advice from her," she snapped, her tone dismissive. especially not about weddings. What would she know about luxury events? I swallowed my response, reminding myself that I was there to support Samantha. I'd be happy to help if you want, Gemma. Even high-end weddings need careful planning and budgeting. Thanks, but no thanks, Gemma retorted sharply. I'll stick with professional planners. You can keep your bargain basement ideas to yourself. Samantha looked visibly disappointed by Gemma's rejection, and I felt a mix of relief and regret. Part of me was glad to escape the tension, yet I wished I could have been of help to Samantha. As we prepared to leave that evening, Samantha pulled me aside, her voice filled with apology. I'm so sorry about Gemma, dear. I don't know where we went wrong with her. It's all right, Samantha. Some people just have different values, I reassured her, patting her arm. As the autumn leaves began to fall, Benjamin surprised me with a proposal. Despite my doubts, I said yes, captivated by the beautiful, large diamond ring that must have cost a fortune. I wondered if this lavish gesture was spurred by Gemma's constant boasting about her wealthy fiancé. Nevertheless, I threw myself into wedding planning with vigor, eager to showcase my styling skills and create something truly unique. I spent hours sketching designs, researching vendors, and crafting a cohesive vision for our big day. I designed a unique wedding dress featuring a stunning oversized bow, created mood boards for the bridesmaids' looks, and developed a comprehensive styling guide for our guests. My plans for the venue decorations aimed to transform the space with a cohesive design that incorporated unexpected, exclusive details. I envisioned beautiful photo areas, an elegant arch, and custom invitations and guest favors that tied into the overall theme. One day, while sharing some of my ideas over coffee with Samantha, her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Oh, Chloe, these are wonderful," she exclaimed. "You have such a talent for this." I wish Gemma would put half as much thought into her wedding. Samantha sighed, a hint of worry in her voice. Gemma isn't very involved in her planning. She says her fiancé's family is handling everything. I'm worried she's not taking it seriously enough. Maybe you could talk to her about her dress at the next family dinner? At the dinner, I cautiously brought up the topic. So, Gemma, have you started looking at wedding dresses yet? Gemma rolled her eyes. Please, I don't need fashion advice from someone who shops at sales. I remained calm, despite the jab. I just thought, since I'm in the industry, I might be able to help you find something unique. I don't need unique, Gemma snapped back. I need something expensive and impressive, something that will show everyone how well I'm marrying. I watched as Benjamin nodded in approval at his sister's words, and my heart sank. Was this the family I was marrying into? As the evening wore on, Gemma continued to boast about her upcoming wedding, emphasizing that nothing but the best would do for her. We drove home in silence, the weight of the evening pressing down on me. A growing sense of unease had taken hold of me. It seemed that no matter what I did, it would never suffice for Benjamin and his sister. I was beginning to lose sight of myself in my efforts to please them. The day of Gemma's wedding arrived, 3 months before my own was planned. Benjamin and I were invited, and as we approached the venue, a mix of excitement and curiosity bubbled within me. I was eager to see the kind of luxurious event Gemma had boasted about organizing. However, the moment I stepped into the venue, my excitement turned to shock. My heart sank as I took in the scene before me. Every detail of the venue was exactly as I had envisioned and planned for my wedding. From the custom arch to the intricately arranged table settings and even the floral arrangements, everything was an exact replica of my designs. As guests admired the decor, each compliment felt like a sharp stab to my heart. These were my ideas, my dreams, now being celebrated as someone else's. The most painful moment came when Gemma made her entrance, wearing a dress identical to the one I had designed for myself, holding the exact bouquet I had envisioned for my own aisle walk. Numb. I watched as our friends and family snapped photos in the beautifully arranged photo zones that I had created, oblivious to the fact that they were admiring a stolen dream. Pulling Benjamin aside, I whispered urgently, "How is this possible? Everything here is exactly what I planned for our wedding. How did Gemma get my designs?" Benjamin looked uneasy and avoided my gaze. "You're imagining things, Chloe," he said nervously. All weddings look kind of similar, don't they? His dismissive tone only fueled my anger and disbelief. I knew what I was seeing. This was not a coincidence. It was a blatant theft of my vision. As I approached Gemma, her fiancé, and the small crowd gathered around them, I could hear the enthusiastic praise from relatives and friends. "Oh, Gemma, the decorations are simply exquisite," one aunt gushed. "Everything is so thoughtfully arranged. You've outdone yourself," another guest added. Gemma basked in the attention, a smug smile on her lips. "Thank you all so much," she replied, her voice dripping with false modesty. "I've been secretly working on this for 10 months. I wanted everything to be perfect." Her fiancé's parents nodded approvingly, showering more praise on their future daughter-in-law. The sight of her taking credit for my hard work made my blood boil. I couldn't stand by and let her steal my creativity. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward and raised my voice so everyone could hear. "I'm curious, Gemma, who exactly is the designer and the author of these wedding decoration ideas?" The chatter around us immediately ceased, creating a heavy silence. Gemma's smug expression faltered, replaced by a look of panic. She glanced around nervously, clearly caught off guard by my direct question. Samantha, Benjamin's mother, turned to me with a confused expression. "Chloe, dear, is everything all right?" she asked. Before I could respond, Benjamin appeared at my side, grabbing my arm. "Chloe, can we talk for a moment?" he whispered urgently, trying to pull me away. "Please don't ruin this day for Gemma." At that moment, I realized that my feelings and the betrayal I felt were being sidelined for the sake of preserving appearances. The realization that Benjamin might never truly stand up for me, even when the evidence of wrongdoing was unmistakable, was disheartening and eye-opening. But I stood firm, shaking off Benjamin's grip. I was done being silenced and overlooked. "No, Benjamin, I need to understand why your sister used my wedding plans and where she got the dress. It's exactly the one I designed for our wedding." Gemma's eyes widened in alarm, and she glanced at Benjamin pleadingly as the murmurs from the guests around us grew louder. Benjamin, his face red with embarrassment, stepped between us. "Chloe, please, our wedding isn't for another 3 months. By then, everyone will have forgotten about this design." "Forgotten?" I echoed, my voice rising with my anger. "Benjamin, do you realize how much time and effort I put into those designs? This isn't just about a wedding. It's about respect and honesty." I turned back to Gemma and demanded, "How did you learn about my decor ideas? Where did you get my dress design?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Benjamin's shoulders slumped in defeat, and he finally spoke, his voice a faint whisper. "I gave them to her, Chloe. I showed Gemma all your designs and sketches." The ground seemed to drop from beneath me. "You what?" Benjamin couldn't meet my eyes as he continued. "And the dress? I gave her your dress too. I thought it would make her wedding unique." Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd. Samantha covered her mouth in disbelief, and Gemma's fiancé stepped back, his expression a mix of confusion and disappointment. The revelation that Gemma was wearing my wedding dress struck me like a physical blow. "How could you do this to me, Benjamin?" To my shock, Benjamin's demeanor shifted. He stood straighter, his eyes defiant. "I don't see what the big deal is, Chloe," he said brashly. "It's just a dress. It's not disposable. It can be worn more than once." I stared at him in disbelief. But Benjamin wasn't finished. "Look," he continued, his voice growing bolder, "we can postpone our wedding for a year if you're so upset. By then, everyone will have forgotten these designs." Then came the final blow. "Besides," Benjamin added dismissively, "I'd do anything for my sister." At his words, Gemma's face lit up with a triumphant smile. She turned to the stunned crowd and announced loudly, "That's right. I'm so happy to wear this beautiful dress, especially knowing how much it bothers Chloe. Don't worry, Chloe, you can wear it after me. If Benjamin still wants to marry you, that is." Something inside me snapped. I looked around at the stolen decor, the copied dress, and the man I thought I loved, defending this betrayal. In that instant, I knew what I had to do. "There won't be a wedding to postpone," I declared, my voice clear and strong. "I'm canceling it." I refuse to marry a man who puts his sister's petty desires above my feelings and our relationship. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Before Benjamin or Gemma could respond, an unexpected voice spoke up. Chloe is right, Samantha, Benjamin's mother, said firmly. She turned to her children, her face a mask of disappointment. I'm ashamed of both of you. Stealing someone's ideas and dreams. Is this how we raised you? Gemma's future in-laws stepped forward, their expressions grim. We're deeply disappointed, Gemma's would-be father-in-law stated. A marriage should not begin with lies and theft. Gemma's face twisted with anger. She whirled on her future in-laws, shouting, I don't care what you think. This is my wedding. Amidst the unfolding chaos, I walked away, knowing I had made the right decision, and liberated from a future that would have surely stifled my spirit and creativity. As Gemma declared her intent to do whatever she wanted, her outburst seemed to be the breaking point for her fiancé. He walked away from her, his face etched with shock and disgust, and approached the DJ's setup. Taking the microphone, he announced to the gathering, his voice reverberating through the venue, I'm sorry, everyone, but there won't be a wedding today. I cannot marry someone who behaves in this manner. As chaos ensued, Benjamin turned to me, his face flushed with anger. Look what you've done, he shouted. You've ruined Gemma's wedding. How could you be so selfish and greedy? But before I could respond, Benjamin's parents intervened. That's enough, Benjamin, his father said sternly. Your sister ruined her wedding, and you helped her. Your mother and I are deeply ashamed that we raised children who would behave like this. Standing amid the chaos, surrounded by what should have been my dream wedding setup, I felt an unexpected relief at having exposed the betrayal. It was a clear sign that I had escaped a future with someone who did not value me. After some reflection and discussions with a lawyer, I decided to take legal action against Benjamin for the moral and financial harm caused by the cancellation of our wedding. To my surprise and relief, Samantha, Benjamin's mother, offered her support. I'll testify on your behalf, Chloe, she told me, her eyes showing a mix of sadness and determination. What Benjamin and Gemma did was wrong, and they must face the consequences. The legal proceedings were tough, but I was prepared. I presented all my original designs, sketches, and detailed receipts of every expense related to our planned wedding. As I stood in court, surrounded by the evidence of my stolen dreams, a sense of closure began to settle in. Eventually, the court ruled in my favor, ordering Benjamin to compensate for both the moral and financial damages. As the judge announced the verdict, I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. It wasn't about the money, it was about justice and being recognized for my creativity and hard work. In the months that followed, I maintained a warm relationship with Samantha and Samuel, my almost in-laws. They updated me on the family drama that unfolded after the scandal. Gemma had been cut off financially and was now working a low-paying job, a tough but perhaps necessary lesson for her. Benjamin's professional life also suffered. Word spread in the tight-knit wedding industry about his role in stealing my designs, making clients wary of working with him. His photography business struggled, a stark reminder of the importance of integrity, especially in a business centered around trust and celebrating life's significant moments. For me, I dived back into my studies with renewed vigor, specializing in wedding fashion, a twist of irony, given my circumstances. The very event that nearly derailed my life had become the cornerstone of my career. My services quickly became sought after. Clients appreciated my attention to detail, my ability to create unique, personalized designs, and, most importantly, my commitment to originality and integrity. Standing in my studio one day, surrounded by sketches of wedding gowns and mood boards for upcoming ceremonies, a smile naturally formed on my face. The path I had taken was filled with challenges, yet it guided me precisely to where I was meant to be. Here I was, living out my dream independently, crafting beauty and joy for others while steadfastly upholding my values. Katie, my best friend, raised an eyebrow as we settled into the comfort of my small but cozy living room, which was surrounded by bookshelves filled with fantasy novels, a true indicator of my passion for reading and writing. "Are you sure about this, Jessica?" she asked cautiously. Exhaling deeply, I tucked a stray hair behind my ear. "About marrying Henry? Absolutely. It's his family that's more complicated, especially his mom," I admitted. Katie's skepticism was palpable. "Mrs. Holland, right?" she asked, to which I could only nod in agreement. Henry's mother, Mrs. Holland, was truly in a league of her own, constantly interfering and judging. And her involvement in our wedding plans had been overwhelming. Just as we broached the topic, the doorbell rang, and Mrs. Holland entered, her presence as commanding as ever. "Jessica, dear, we need to talk about your wedding dress," she announced without a preliminary greeting. Bracing myself, I inquired, "What about the dress, Mrs. Holland's?" She dismissed my choice with a wave of her hand. "The one you picked isn't suitable. I found the perfect one yesterday. It's slightly above your budget," she stated, her tone brooking no argument. "Slightly's?" I pressed, fearing her definition of slight. "It's double your budget, but it's worth every penny," she declared confidently. I shared a helpless look with Katie. "Mrs. Holland, I can't afford that," I protested. "Nonsense," she snapped. "It's your special day. You should cut corners elsewhere. This dress is essential." Feeling cornered, I reluctantly agreed, knowing it would be less troublesome than opposing her. The following day, we visited the bridal shop. The dress was indeed stunning, but the price tag was nauseating. As I tried it on, Mrs. Holland gushed over how fabulous I looked, sealing the deal herself. "It's settled then," she announced, clapping her hands joyously. "We'll take it." I hesitated due to the cost, but before I could speak, she interrupted, "Don't worry. Consider it my gift to you." A wave of relief washed over me. Perhaps I had misjudged her after all. Fast forward to the wedding day. The dress was a sensation, and I truly felt like royalty. However, when I approached Mrs. Holland later about the dress payment, she conveniently backtracked on her promise. "Jessica, dear, I never said I'd pay for the whole thing. I just helped you choose, that's all," she claimed, brushing off my shock. "You must have misunderstood. Anyway, it's done now. No use crying over spilled milk." Stunned and feeling deceived, I realized Katie's earlier caution was right. I should have been more vigilant. On another seemingly ordinary Thursday, I was in my home office, the smallest room in the house, surrounded by my writing materials. It was my sanctuary, or at least it was supposed to be. The tranquility was shattered by the doorbell. Mrs. Holland, true to form, had arrived unannounced, treating our home as if it were a public space. "Jessica, dear, I'm here," she declared from the living room, not even waiting for me to come to the door. Taking a deep breath, I braced myself and greeted her, trying to keep my tone pleasant. "Hi, Mrs. Holland." "Oh, there you are, hiding in your little room," she commented, looking around with disdain. "You really should get out more, dear." Forcing a smile, I replied, "I'm quite busy with my writing." "Writing, scripting," she dismissed, waving her hand. "You need to live a little." "Now, where's the remote?" As Mrs. Holland settled comfortably on my couch and flicked on the television, a surge of annoyance bubbled up inside me. My home was slowly transforming into her preferred daytime escape. Trying to retain my composure, I addressed her, "Mrs. Holland, I need to focus on some work today," hoping my tone conveyed both firmness and politeness. She raised an eyebrow, her response dripping with condescension. "Oh, don't fuss about those little stories now. I need my relaxation. Plus, popping over here saves me quite a bit on my utility bills, you know." Her sheer nerve left me momentarily speechless. The situation escalated when she headed to the kitchen. "What's for lunch, Jessica?" "I'm quite hungry," she declared, as she began rummaging through my refrigerator. I trailed behind her, my irritation mounting. "Actually, Mrs. Holland, I haven't gotten around to making lunch yet. I plan to eat later," I informed her. Unperturbed, she shrugged and started pulling ingredients from the shelves. "That's fine. I'll make do. But you really should consider keeping your pantry better stocked, she remarked casually. There I stood, watching her dominate my kitchen and deplete my groceries. The intrusion was glaringly apparent. At that moment, Henry came home for lunch and was surprised to see his mother. "Mom, what brings you here?" he inquired, clearly caught off guard. "Just a little visit. Jessica and I are spending a delightful day together," she fibbed smoothly. I shot Henry a look, hoping he might intervene. Instead, he just shrugged and joined his mother in front of the TV, clearly choosing to remain neutral. Later, the setting sun cast a warm glow into my small home office, filled with fantasy novels and my writing. The coziness of the room contrasted sharply with my current frustrations. Abruptly, Mrs. Holland stormed in, her expression a mix of annoyance and scorn. "Jessica, why are you holed up in here? You act as if you're wedded to your computer. There's an entire world outside these walls," she criticized harshly. Pausing my work, I tried to maintain my calm. "Mrs. Holland, I'm working. This is my profession, my career," I explained. She scoffed loudly. "A profession? Sitting all day, conjuring up fairy tales? That's hard work. It's utter nonsense. Get a real job. Do something meaningful." Her words were cut, each one landing sharply. Before I could muster a rebuttal, Henry appeared, his face mirroring his mother's disapproval. "What's going on here?" he asked, leaning casually against a frame. Mrs. Holland gestured dismissively toward my computer. "Your wife thinks she's contributing to the world with these fanciful tales," she remarked. Henry looked at me, his eyes cold and judgmental. "Jessica, Mom has a point.
This isn't really a job.
When will you leave these fantasies behind and engage in something truly valuable?" A knot tightened in my stomach. "Henry, what I do is valuable. I am a writer. My work is recognized internationally," I asserted. He chuckled dismissively. "Internationally? Come on, don't exaggerate. How much do you even earn from these so-called books?" It's laughable. Fighting back frustration, I stood my ground. My writing is impactful. It's not merely about the earnings. Henry shook his head, pity etched on his face. "Jessica, passion doesn't pay the bills. It's high time you got a real job, one with a steady paycheck." Their conversation spiraled, each iteration slicing deeper, suffocating me with its intensity. My dreams seemed trivial under their relentless scrutiny. "I don't need to justify my career choices to anyone," I declared, standing my ground. Henry arched an eyebrow. "Defensive, classic. When you can't handle the truth, you run." I swallowed the sharp retort on my tongue, knowing it would only stoke their fire. Mrs. Holland, seizing on my moment of defeat, delivered her final blow. "Think about it, Jessica. We're only saying this for your good. Someday, you'll thank us when you're living in the real world." With those words, they left, abandoning me in my office surrounded by my books, my sanctuary, their harsh words echoing around me, a painful reminder of their misunderstanding and lack of respect. How much longer could I endure this environment, where my aspirations were merely a source of mockery? The future, once radiant with potential, now felt bleak and uncertain. It was a typical Saturday morning, one that normally promised relaxation. Yet for me, it marked the beginning of another dreaded weekend ritual. No sooner had the clock struck 9 than Marin, Henry's sister, arrived, her 3 energetic kids in tow. "Hey, Jessica. Hope we're not too early," Marin chimed as she entered, the children scattering through the house. "No, not at all. Good morning, everyone," I replied, masking my dismay with a smile. Marin, unaware of my discomfort, flopped onto the sofa. "Phew, what a week. I'm beat. These kids have driven me up the wall. Thank God for Saturdays, right?" I nodded, resignation settling in.
"Right.
"Would you like some coffee?" "That would be great. Thanks," she said, already distracted by her phone. Navigating a minefield of toys, I made my way to the kitchen. I felt more like a nanny and housekeeper than a host. When I returned with the coffee, the living room had descended into chaos. "Oh, Jessica, could you whip up some of your pancakes? The kids are starving." It wasn't a request, but an expectation. Sure, I'll get started, I said, my plans for a peaceful weekend evaporating. The kitchen turned into my battleground as I managed pancakes, coffee, and the chaos of kids. Amidst the flipping and serving, Henry walked in, his brow furrowed. Jessica, why do you always buy these expensive ingredients? We need to cut down on expenses, he grumbled, eyeing the breakfast spread. I sighed, frustration simmering. Henry, your sister, and her kids eat here every weekend. It adds up. He shrugged, dismissive. Well, they're family. You can make do with less fancy stuff to save some money. The rest of the day blurred into a cycle of cooking, cleaning, and catering to endless demands. By the time Marin corralled her children out the door, I was physically and emotionally drained. As I slumped onto the couch, Henry approached with a frown. You have to save some money on my nephews and my sister, he said. Incredulous. I stared at him.
Me?
You're the one who never says no to her. Henry dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. I'm just trying to help you budget better, Jessica. It wouldn't hurt to be more economical, you know? The irony was almost comical. There I was, orchestrating a makeshift weekend childcare and cafe, and yet he dared to preach frugality to me. The urge to yell, to make him see the inequity of it all, was overwhelming, but experience taught me that my words would be wasted. Once everyone finally left, and the house fell silent, that precious tranquility became mine alone. This was the sacred time I reserved for my writing, the few uninterrupted hours to pursue my passion. Just past midnight, I sat down in my study, the dim light of my monitor the only illumination, as I dove deep into the narrative worlds I crafted. Suddenly, the door creaked. Henry appeared, his face clouded with annoyance and exhaustion. Jessica, are you still up? Think of the electricity bill. I took a deep breath to calm myself. Henry, night is the only time I get to write. You know how busy our days are. He stood there, arms folded, his tone becoming harsher. Busy? Do you call taking care of your family busy? That's your duty, Jessica. This night owl routine isn't just impractical, it's costly. Consider our expenses for once. I couldn't hide my disbelief. Really, Henry? We're talking about expenses now. Not the fact that I'm giving up sleep and my well-being to keep my career alive. He scoffed. Career? That little side project of yours? Be realistic, Jessica. Prioritize properly. Frustration surged within me. This side project is more than just a hobby, Henry. It's my work, my passion. Why can't you see that? He shook his head dismissively. What I see is money wasted and a wife distracted by dreams instead of her family. His words stung fiercely. Standing up to face him directly, I asserted, writing is part of who I am. It's essential to me, and I won't just drop it because you deem it inconvenient. He snorted. Inconvenient? It's downright futile, a drain on our resources, and completely unproductive. The sting of his words was sharp, almost physical. I am productive, Henry. Just not in the way you want me to be. Why is that so hard for you to understand? He shrugged coldly, his indifference palpable. Maybe I'd see it your way if it actually made money. Until then, it's just a bothersome hobby. With that, he left, leaving me alone with my thoughts in the softly lit room, my vision blurred by tears. Struggling to keep my dream afloat felt lonelier than ever, especially without the support of the one person who should have stood by me. In the kitchen, the next day, tension filled the air. I was mid-stir when Henry walked in, his mother in tow, casting a shadow that felt almost literal. Marin and her husband need us to watch their kids for 3 weeks, he declared, the finality in his voice brooking no argument. I stopped stirring, shock freezing me for a moment. 3 weeks? Henry, that's a massive imposition. Mrs. Holland cut in sharply. It's family, Jessica. You don't turn away family. My frustration mounted as I thought of my deadlines. But my writing, I have commitments. I can't just drop everything to babysit. Henry's sarcasm was biting. You're writing? Please, Jessica. It's not as if you're crafting a masterpiece. Family always comes first. Desperate for any ally, I turned to Mrs. Holland, hoping for some support. Perhaps the children could stay with you for a bit? She recoiled as if I'd suggested the unthinkable.
Me?
Look after 3 young children at my age? Absolutely not. I had spent years dedicated to raising our kids, and the idea of needing another solution briefly crossed my mind, perhaps hiring a nanny just for a couple of weeks. When I suggested this, both of them stared as if I had sprouted an extra head. Mrs. Holland, with a dismissive tone, retorted, "Why squander money on that when you're already here?" Henry agreed, nodding. "Exactly, Jessica. We don't have endless cash. You need to think practically." I was stunned. Practical? You're asking me to sacrifice 3 weeks of my life, my work, for nothing, and I'm the one who needs to be practical? Henry's expression turned stern. "This isn't up for discussion, Jessica. This is what families do for each other. Aren't you a part of this family anymore?" A wave of anger washed over me. "No, Henry, I haven't forgotten, but it seems you've forgotten that I have my own life and commitments." Mrs. Holland scoffed. "Commitments? Those silly little writings? Don't overreact. It's just 3 weeks of babysitting." My voice rose in frustration. "It's not just babysitting. It's about my time, my career. Why can't either of you see that?" Henry's look grew icy. "Because, Jessica, in the real world, people don't just chase fantasies. They make sacrifices. They do what's necessary for their family." Shaking with irritation, I countered. "And what about what's necessary for me? Do my dreams and goals not matter to you at all?" He leaned closer, his tone threatening. "If you don't do this, Jessica, it's over. I'll file for divorce. Is that what you want?" His words struck me like a slap, the threat of divorce looming like a dark cloud. The day the kids arrived felt like the calm before the storm. I watched from the window as Marin's car pulled up, her lively trio spilling out. Mrs. Holland greeted them warmly, the doting grandmother. It would have been almost funny if it weren't for what I had in mind. "Jessica, darling, could you help with the kids?" Mrs. Holland's voice oozed fake sweetness. I forced a smile, masking my brewing plan. "Of course, I'll be right there." Stepping into the living room, I found chaos already unleashed, the kids running wild, Mrs. Holland struggling to maintain control. "Finally, Jessica, I thought you'd never come," she snapped, her pleasant mask fading. Henry entered a mix of annoyance and relief on his face. "Jessica, make sure they don't wreck the place. I'm going to be in my office." I nodded, heart pounding with anticipation. "Actually, I need to step out for a bit. I'll be back soon." Henry scowled. "Go out now? Are you kidding me, Jessica? You can't leave us with all this." I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "It's just for a bit, Henry. I need to pick up some groceries. You'll manage, won't you?" Mrs. Holland glared. "You're being completely irresponsible, Jessica. This is not the time for your little shopping trips." Ignoring her, I grabbed my purse. "I won't be long. Keep an eye on the kids." I couldn't suppress a laugh as I closed the door behind me, their astonished faces etched in my mind. I didn't head for the store. Instead, I made my way straight to the apartment. Several days before relocating, I arranged everything and moved into my new apartment when the place was vacant. It felt like my sanctuary, a fresh beginning. As I settled into the sparse surroundings, a sense of relief washed over me. The laughter and newfound freedom were invigorating. I was breaking away from their stifling influence. I knew Henry would soon discover the divorce papers I left behind in my office. Imagining his surprise and anger gave me a twisted sense of pleasure. I had reclaimed my life. Calls and messages poured in from Henry, Mrs. Holland, and even Marin, but I dismissed them. I was finished dealing with their drama and self-centeredness. That evening, as I lay in my new bed, the quiet was a welcome change from the turmoil I had left behind. I reveled in the thought of Henry and Mrs. Holland being overwhelmed by the kids. Now, it was their turn to feel the pressure. The fallout from my departure was more intense than any plot twist in my novels. Friends eagerly relayed the chaos at my old home. One evening, my phone displayed Henry's number, and I could hear the pandemonium in the background. "Jessica, you have to come back. These kids are unbearable, Henry pleaded, his voice edged with desperation. I smirked, savoring his distress. Really, Henry? Sounds like you're enjoying yourself, I teased. This isn't funny, Jessica. My mom is at her wit's end, and I can't do this alone, he continued. I relaxed further into my chair, enjoying my moment of vengeance. Well, Henry, you should have considered that earlier. I'm not coming back to be your caretaker, I replied coolly. After a brief pause, he apologized, a rarity from him, but it did little to sway me. Sorry doesn't change the past, Henry. I warned you, I said firmly and hung up, silencing his further objections. Though the satisfaction was fleeting, it soon gave way to a profound sense of peace and liberation. A few days later, I met Katie for coffee. So, I heard Mrs. Holland called Marin, demanding she come back early to take care of the kids, Katie mentioned with a hint of mischief. I chuckled, sipping my coffee. Yeah, Marin stood her ground and insisted on her break. Can you imagine the drama unfolding there? Katie laughed. And your book, it's a sensation, Jessica. It's all anyone can talk about. Pride swelled within me. I had poured my soul into it, and it was my finest work to date. Leaning in, Katie lowered her voice. The main antagonist. She resembles your mother-in-law, doesn't she? I raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk dancing on my lips. Does she? I hadn't noticed. Walking back to my apartment later, I reflected on the significant strides I had taken. Leaving Henry and his overbearing family was the best choice I had ever made. I was finally prioritizing myself and my dreams. My latest novel was just the beginning. The villain, inspired subtly by Mrs. Holland, had resonated with readers immediately. My friends saw the likeness straight away, but for me, it represented more than just a resemblance. It was a therapeutic release, a way to conclude a painful chapter in my life.